Welcome everyone to the regular board meeting of the Halton Catholic District School Board on Tuesday, November the 19th, 2019. Please be reminded that this meeting is recorded and will be published on YouTube. Trustee Swann, could you lead us in opening prayer?
Yes, I would like to join everybody in the sign of our prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Father, bless us all our endeavors, especially today's meeting. Guide us in our discussions. Enlighten our minds in every decision that we make. Give us your grace that we may effectively do our parts as public servants. Bless our plans, programs, and projects so that we may achieve our objectives for your greater glory. All these we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Honoring the land and territory. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Ottawa-Huron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, our Catholic social teachings call us in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions, lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us. All these wonderful elements of creation exist, gifted to us by our Creator God. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations for being stewards of this traditional territory. I'd like to ask everybody to stand up for the Canada.
I affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Canada, her heirs and successors, and will be faithful and observe the laws of Canada with the Tomasi as a Canadian citizen. Motions adopted in camera. There were two motions adopted to ask staff to return with a report on EAs and grievance procedures. Information received in camera?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following information was received in camera. Academic appointments. Tom Duran appointed as acting elementary vice principal effective December 2nd to December 20th. 2019. Ron Esteban appointed acting curriculum consultant November 4th, 2019 to January 17th, 2020 approximately. Renata Dean appointed curriculum consultant generalist French effective November 18th, 2019 for a period of up to 3 years with a possibility of a 1-year extension. Retirement, Babe Santucci retiring effective November 22nd, 2019.
Thank you, Trustee Murphy. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, I've had a request to move item 8.9 because we have some guests who would be happy to answer questions if there are any questions relating to the financial statements. Pardon me? We're moving it to 8.2. Okay. Any other So may I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please? Trustee Duarte? Trustee Tomasi? All in favor? Motion carries. Any declaration of conflicts? Trustee O'Brien.
Yes, items 8.2 and 8.9. Both of these items deal with operational budget. Teacher salaries and benefits are in the operational budget. My spouse is a teacher with the board, therefore I will be declaring a conflict of interest with these items.
Anyone else? Thank you, Trustee O'Brien. We have a number of presentations this evening. And actually, the presentation in particular is 4.1 50th Anniversary Kickoff and Pilgrimage of... so Superintendent Crowell, would you take the lead on this, please?
So good evening. It's our pleasure to represent the board this evening on the 50th anniversary of the Halton Catholic District School Board. There's an information report which will be shared later, which will kind of give all of the initiatives which we're going to undertake this year as the board for the 50th anniversary. We have a couple of representatives of our committee that are here with us tonight. So Tara Hambley is here. She's the president of Elect Elementary. And we have Tracy Babick, who is is our elementary vice principal at St. Benedict. And Jillian Federico, our system chaplain. So we have two purposes tonight. The first one is that we have, we're going to launch the celebrations, so for this significant milestone. So a couple just notes, key milestones. So in 1969 was the amalgamation of the Halton County Roman Catholic Separate School Board. 25th anniversary of our board was celebrated in 1994. Our name at that time was the Halton Roman Catholic Separate School Board. And this year we celebrate our 50th anniversary of the Halton Catholic District School Board. Behind Mr. Lofts at the back there is our 25th anniversary time capsule, which was built by the staff at Loyola Secondary School in 1994 to be opened this year. And we are going to take that opportunity to open it this evening. So I'd ask our chair and vice chair to please join me. We're not exactly sure what's inside, so venture. If it's ticking, don't stand outside. Director Daly, do you want to join us as well?
Thanks.
So it just lifts off right at the top. So what I'm going to your tennis show? Do you want any more pictures like this? So what's inside, here's there's an envelope from the central office, along with envelopes from all of the different schools that were in existence at that time to be opened in 2019. So our committee is now going to work to figure out exactly what to do with stuff in the time capsule. We were anticipating something like this, and our thinking will be that we'd like to set up a display in our atrium, our foyer, so that people can see what's in this. We also want to make sure that we're going to be able to share what came from each of the schools 25 years ago with those schools, so it gets back to this. And that's Ms. Babick who joined us front here just to talk about the time capsule for the 50th anniversary.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. So for the 50th anniversary time capsule, we decided to put it out to our SHISM program and reached out to the Department Head of Tech at Bishop Redding. And so he's looking at his students to come up with a proposal for how they're going to design and then create the 50th anniversary time capsule. So we've given them some criteria that they can use as guidelines to follow. So our intention is that each school will receive a drawstring bag that they can fill with their artifacts representing their school that they'll contribute to the time capsules. There'll be about 60 of those bags that we're hoping it can be accommodated. We've asked them to use sustainable or eco-friendly materials to build it as a sign of our times, and also, if possible, to take an element from the existing time capsule, if it can be done carefully and thoughtfully without destroying the integrity of this one, and integrate it into the new design of the capsule as well. So they're quite excited about it. We're working on the details. They're going to draft a proposal as soon as possible, and it's our hope that it's ready in time to reveal at our April 3rd event, which Mr. Kroll will go into more detail, I believe, later on during the board meeting. And then it's our hope that during our Walk with Jesus event in May, when all of our schools are represented with their delegations, that those students will also bring forth their bag with their artifacts that we will then put into the time capsule and seal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the items in the 25th anniversary time capsule, we're going to use our social media, our communications department to help share out as much of that digitally as we can so that it can be accessed by everyone in the board. And as Ms. Babick said, we're going to work with our schools to gather some really great representation of all the great things that are going on our school board this year to be encapsulated for the next 25 years.
Okay. Go further on that. Is there anything else? No, that's it. Okay. So as well, you'll recall that a few weeks back, we shared with you our plans for Pilgrimage of the Cross to celebrate our 50th anniversary. And so our hopes is that tonight we would launch that pilgrimage from the boardroom. So I'd ask Jillian Federico to come forward and talk a little bit about that, as she's been spearheading this project.
Good evening. As you would have learned from the package, our intention is to take this beautiful cross, which was created for us by Rick Carney, one of the shop teachers at Corpus Christi High School, and it will travel from school to school throughout the board. You are going to have the privilege of being the first people to carry this tonight, and you will carry it out of this room. And from here it will go to Corpus Christi Secondary School, where it will be greeted tomorrow morning by the students, and then from there on it will go through every school of the board, so that the intention is that where the schools are close enough, students from one school will carry it out halfway, and will meet students from the receiving school who will take it from them and then carry it into their own school. And the cross will spend a week in each of the schools, during which time it is going to be available for private devotion or for small group devotion with classes, or for something larger that involves the whole school community. And we're quite excited about this. It's a work of art. It certainly is a focus for our faith. It reminds us that we all gather together around the cross, and that this is where we find our hope and our reason for being. And so that is quite a privilege. And we've very carefully manicured the dates so that it will reach its final destination, Jean Vanier Secondary School, on the 28th of May of 2021. And at that time it will go with the students who go to the velodrome for Walk with Jesus, and then it will find its final resting place, which we hope will be inside one of the school buildings, and it will be there on show for the next 25 years, perhaps. We have a journal which will be traveling with the cross, and the trustees will be invited this evening to sign your names on a prayer which is on the very first page of that journal, so that as it goes to each school, the schools will be invited to add a prayer or a reflection, and the signatures perhaps of the administrators, some of the students, so that it will be carried with it and will become a treasure to accompany the cross when we're able to look back on it in years to come. And at this time, I would invite you to join me in the prayer for the pilgrimage of the cross. which you find in your package. And I invite you to respond with any of the words that are in bold font. And we begin with the sign of the cross, with the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. A reading from the letter to the Philippians. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in human likeness. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Therefore God also highly exalted him, and gave him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bend in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. The word of the Lord. This is the wood of the cross on which hung the Savior of the world. Come, let us adore. Lord, by your cross and resurrection, you set us free. You are Savior of the world. For each step that we might take, you are guide, O Lord, of life. For each load that we might bear, you are strength, O Lord, of life. For each mountain we might face, you are power, O Lord, of life. For each river that might impede, you are safety, O Lord, of life. For each place where we might rest, you are peace, O Lord of life. For each sunrise and sunset, you are joy, O Lord of life. God bless the path on which we go. God bless the earth beneath our feet. God bless our destination. May our journey throughout the Halton Catholic District School Board with this cross be a sign of our desire to grow in you and to learn to love you more each day. May it tell others about our celebration as we mark 50 years as a community of faith in Catholic education. And may God bless us and our work, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amanda, do you remember how long this song is?
If you'd like a fountain pen, there is one here.
Between
You're
now
welcome
and
to
now,
use your own pen if you prefer. The sign on it.
We can,
Need some paper for the rest of us. Man, oh man. They don't let you write in Georgetown? Then he goes.
crossed on that, brother.
It is our intention to encourage our students to sing as they accompany the cross. And the song that we will be using is Sia Hamba, We Are Marching.
Okay, I'm going to put down for you. You're going to sing.
Hi, how are you? Not bad, very good. Good to see you here in the basement. It's been working for you guys. Okay.
Do you want to just let them know that tomorrow is No, I just need to. Okay, I think that is. At 9 o'clock, we will just let them know, and that's good.
And just a reminder that if anyone is interested, the cross will be at Christ the King tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and we'll go on there into the schools in Georgetown. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we have a few delegations tonight. The first one, policy 2-51, optional French programming, Canadian Parents for French. I invite the members of the Canadian Parents for French, Ontario, to come up and present their delegation. You should be reminded that we've allotted 10 minutes for every presentation in the interest of efficiency.
I'm short, so if I sit, I won't be able to see everybody over there, and if I stand, can you hear me on the microphone? Okay, because I don't like talking to people that I'm behind the screen. Okay. Is that okay? Great, thank you. I'm Mary Cruden. I'm past president of Canadian Parents for French Ontario. I'm chair of the Ontario Advocacy Committee for Canadian Parents for French, and I sit on our National Public Policy Committee as well. Thank you, trustees, for the opportunity to delegate tonight. Just want to go for a little walk back through history. In 2013, this book came out, the Framework for French as a Second Language policy document in Ontario. It was published after an extensive consultation with stakeholders and experts. I was one of those stakeholders involved in this project. Its stated purpose is to maximize opportunities for Ontario students to reach their full potential in French as a second language, and to call all stakeholders to take action to strengthen French as a second language programming. It states that learning French as a second language gives students the significant advantages of being able to communicate in both official languages. It enhances first language and overall literacy skills, interpersonal and social skills, and increases post-secondary and job opportunities. We have 3 goals for French as a second language education in Ontario. The first being to increase student confidence, proficiency, and achievement in French as a second language, increase the percentage of students studying French until graduation, and increase student, educator, parents, and community engagement in French as a second language. In terms of decision-making, it recommends that stakeholder involvement is a vital part of the process, and that choices are best made in consultation with stakeholders, taking current research into consideration. A key point in this policy is on equity in French as a second language, and that participation in language programs should reflect the diversity of the student population, including students with special education needs and English language learners. In 2010, Halton Catholic adopted a strategic plan that identified opportunities for students as a system priority. In 2012, Halton Catholic followed up by starting early French immersion based on a very compelling level of interest from parents. The rationale for building the French immersion program is as valid today as it was then. We thank the previous board for making the French immersion program permanent, and you, the current board, for taking the next steps in developing policy and procedures that support French immersion and extended French students, and strong, effective, and inclusive French programs until grade 12 graduation. For parents who believe strongly that a good education includes becoming proficient in both official languages, early French immersion continues to be the optimal approach. It provides an early start, high intensity, and maximum possible time in French. And have to say, though, that the Halton Catholic model of 50% French starting in grade 1 is the ministry minimum entry point as a French immersion program. Generally, French Immersion grade 12 students achieve the high intermediate level of proficiency on the Common European Framework of Reference. That enables students to attend a French university, while students in core French achieve a basic level of proficiency. Extended French students fall somewhere in between. For core and extended French, provincial funding and curriculum are provided starting in grade 4. Funding is available for immersion from junior kindergarten, and the curriculum begins in grade 1, as it does in the English program. Parents expect that public education will provide the best possible opportunities for their children, and that access to these opportunities will not be rationed. Parents do understand the practical reality that it takes time to achieve the universally accessible and fully rolled out to grade 12 programs that most other boards in Ontario with a 40-year head start on you have. However, parents do expect to see continual improvement and commitment from their trustees and school board leaders to mirror their own commitment to their children and to official language bilingualism in Canada. About 13% of the Ontario JK-12 student population are in French immersion or extended French. That's 53 out of 60 English language school boards. The remaining 7 represent 2 to 3% of the entire student population, so a very small group has yet to add it to their repertoire. Student participation in French immersion has been growing at an average rate of 5.7% for the last 13 consecutive years across Ontario. Graduates of the programs are now parents and grandparents themselves. We expect that Halton Catholic parents will continue to seek the same or better opportunities for their children in French immersion wherever they can find them, and that the uptake will grow at Halton Catholic in the same steady, manageable way as it has done elsewhere as you build a quality program right through to grade 12. The French policy that you're reviewing tonight in its draft form and the procedure that I also looked at are a good start. CPF Ontario had some very specific advice around it, some edits that were warranted for clarity and consistency, and in your package in Appendix D, it's fully laid out with comments line by line. I watched the meeting from last week. I had to submit this before I was able to watch the meeting, but the sibling report that you received didn't help as much with the basic pros and cons of a sibling rule. So I just wanted to say that a sibling rule, when it's used to ration spots, it does reduce the chances of entry for firstborn children. However, it's a useful short-term stopgap humane measure to proceed as the program grows to meet demand. The main issue of fairness around French immersion, and indeed for extended, is not having enough spots for all children who apply. This is a solvable problem. As you can grow the program to meet demand, rationing by lottery, which labels some students as winners and some students as losers, can and does become a thing of the past, as does the younger sibling advantage. Once you get to the point where you have enough spots, then the sibling rule can stay in place because it helps to keep families at the same school location instead of sending them hither and yon to different French immersion sites. So one of the things that having a sibling rule and expanding does is to show that the board is concerned with family well-being and is also interested in providing stability and predictability in the program, which is essential to building a strong and accessible program for all students. In terms of next steps, we do believe that further refinement of the policy would be warranted. That the policy as it stands and hopefully as it develops further will be used to increase the number of French immersion spots and adding new sites as needed to address demand. We'd like to see the full rollout of French immersion to grade 12. Your lead class is in grade 7, as I understand it, and I've yet to see any specific plan about what high school is going to look like for these kids, and I would imagine their parents and indeed the kids themselves are thinking about it right now. And then another thing that's wise to do is to have annual public reporting on this related to enrollment successes and challenges so that these conversations can be informed as they continue. Would like to see more detail around the procedures to support creation of a French second language working group with parent involvement, a best practice around the province, FSL-focused professional development. Very happy to note that you have a full-time consultant here, which is great, and very specific wording and procedures about inclusion of students with special education needs and English language learners. You want to show always that you are going to provide the same level of support in all programming. So in conclusion, French Immersion is a solid, research-based and validated educational program, probably one of the most researched things in education in Canada. Immersion students generally achieve the same level in EQA English as their English-only counterparts do, but they have the added benefit of proficiency in French, our other official language. As I stated, your draft policy is a reasonable step forward in support of expanding French programs for your community. From here, we could grow stronger, fully accessible French programs. I think that's what boards do. Boards build great programming, and you're poised to do that for your French immersion and extended programs going forward. I want to thank you and the staff at Halton Catholic for the support that you have given thus far in teaching and learning French, and trust that Canadian Parents for French Ontario is looking forward to future collaboration with you, with parents, trustees, and staff at the Halton Catholic School Board to ensure that your French programs become the best ones in the province. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee Carabella.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Is the government and the ministry supporting French as second language with, how are they supporting future growth?
Okay, so there are so many things that the Ministry of Education is doing, so I'll start with, first of all, there is funding. You get funding based on the enrollment that you have in these programs. So I just got, I can tell you specifically. So as an example, this is from the technical paper, which outlines, as I'm sure you know, because you probably went through a big budget problem in the spring like everyone else did, outlines the per head funding for French programs. So a student that is in grade 1 in French immersion generates an additional $385 per student for your bottom line. And you can go to the CPF Ontario website and it lays out how much money that is for each board. But basically, the greater your enrollment, the more of this money that flows into your board. And that is the same thing at the secondary level. So each credit done in French immersion generates additional funds. So that's the first way. And that funding has been in place since 1977. It was brought in under the Bill Davis government. Other ways they do it. There's the curriculum, documents, fully laid out curriculum for grade 1, right through to grade 12. Whoops. For French immersion and extended and core. These documents came out in 2013-14, and they are replacements of previous several generations of curriculum around that. The Ministry of Education has a full-on PD site called Transforming FSL, which you can access really easily online, that shows all of the great resources that the Ministry is putting out. I could go on and on. The Ministry supports TFO, Télé Français Ontario, which is the French language equivalent of TVO, with an entire suite of online resources. I think they're up in the neighborhood of 10,000 online resources that are geared towards JK to 12 students that your teachers can access. All I got to do is set up a free account, and there's 10,000 resources there. So if there's anything specific in terms of support that you're looking for, I could probably talk for another hour on all the great work that they do to do this, but the bottom line is they're there for you, they're funding it, they're resourcing it, they're providing great professional development opportunities, and they are truly behind the program. All of them.
I will allow myself a question as well. You made some reference in your presentation to the policy that we are currently working on as being a good start. Do you have any observations as to how it could be enhanced, improved?
We had quite a few observations about how it could be enhanced, so I don't have your actual package in front of me, but the material that I provided, Appendix D, has a red line version of your policy with suggestions. So I think one of the key things would be to clarify that French Immersion is actually a program that starts in grade 1 and goes all the way to grade 12. If you just read your policy as is, it sounds kind of like it ends in grade 8, and as last time I checked, nobody in Ontario gets to graduate after grade 8. I think another thing that you should give consideration to is not calling it optional French program. I think for the parents, and I know there are many of them here tonight, once they make the choice and they get their spot, that is their child's regular program, and by calling it optional, it kind of downgrades it in people's thinking. So some other boards have removed the word optional from their policy, in fact, many years ago, in recognition of that. So it's great to call, you'll see in ministry documents, they will call it intensive French programs if you want to catch all, or you just call it French Immersion and Extended French, call it what it is, but at least that validates the choice that the parents have made and indicates the strong support that you're giving as a board. So that's one thing.
I think as a board, the word struggle isn't the right word, but I think we're all motivated in trying to strike a balance between what appears to be a very worthwhile program. Any contribution towards that end that could help refine the policy ultimately that I come up with is...
So I'm not sure I'm clear on what you're asking me for. Could you
well, those items which you've highlighted.
Yeah.
If there are others, if there's any other contribution, I think that would be welcomed by all.
Okay. I think I know that one of the things you were discussing at last week's meeting was related to whether or not you should have a sibling rule. And certainly that's something that Canadian Parents for French has supported in boards across the province, and I think it's something that should be included in your policy. I know it's difficult to make choices, but I think in terms of being humane and valuing your families, that it's an important addition to the repertoire of what you have to work with in what I hope will be a really short period of time while you ramp up to having enough spots for everybody so that you aren't having to say who gets in first. You're having a conversation about everybody gets in. We're going to try to place everybody where it makes the most sense, and at the end of the day, where it makes financial sense, because you don't want your busing all going like this. So I think that's something that you should give consideration to tonight, and it would be a very important addition to this. That I think one other thing about sibling rule that people don't really think about, you know, French Immersion is a bit more than just build it and they will come. Yes, you open it, but it also needs to be supported in ways with groups of parents, pioneers essentially, pioneer parents, and your pioneer parents are now in grade 7, okay? But the program has basically stayed the same size year over year. You've got a core group of parents who are extremely committed that help to create a strong program. And within that, when you have siblings coming along, they create the strength for the program and the family, but they also help to create the strength for you at the board because they provide good peer-to-peer support. Not every new cohort is entirely brand new, right? You're building in strengths as you grow your program through the years. And, you know, once you do that and you get fully rolled out, which will be not until your first cohort gets to grade 12, you've got to think about what you need to put in place to make this thing go. right? So there's all that great stuff from the ministry, there's the great work that you're going to be doing here, but you also need a strength of a parent group that is supporting it at the school level, and I hope that you'll give them voice at the board too with some kind of FSL working group.
Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Excellent presentation. I'd like to address one of your point of next steps, where it says, ACSCB, you're advocating procedures to support provision of special education support in French immersion, equivalent to support offered in English.
Yep.
I think that's an excellent next step. I worked in a public board where that wasn't the case, for CERT intervention was never done for French immersion students. And the solution when a student was struggling was always to get them out of French immersion. So I'm really glad you put this in here. So my question to you is, and I've seen this many times, when it comes down to whether or not the child should stay in the program or not, that the parents often lost that battle. Do you sense that that final decision should reside with the parent?
Yes, I do, but I also think that parents are not always given a full picture or made aware of the resources that are available to them. So, you know, I mentioned that the funding for French immersion and so on started with the Ontario government in the mid-1970s. I went back to and found the original policy documents at the Toronto Public Library a few years ago, and one of the things that really astonished me was that it was all laid out that those special ed supports should be the same as they are in English. That was in 1977. Wow. And here we are in 2019, and I fully acknowledge that this happens. Parents get nervous, right? They get a not proceeding well, or however it's framed on the report card these days. My kids are now like grown up, but and they get worried. And the teacher might not feel entirely qualified or hasn't received additional support to support the kid within French immersion. So there are a lot of pieces that have to be in place for this to work, but I think the most important thing to begin with is ensuring that there's a strong policy foundation. And certainly, you know, parents that have children with are amazing advocates. Bar none. Every single parent I've met that struggled with that, they read, they look, they're always searching for answers to support their children. Well, they're going to go to the Ministry of Education, and they're going to find this companion document to the FSL framework, which states what you and I just said. Okay. And then from there, boards across the province have specifically made some commitments in their policies, and then you have to turn around, and that has to be followed through with what you're doing in terms of professional development. Boards took this document and did PD specific to this over the last 4 years. So I don't know if this board has or not, but there is work to be done to do that, because you do not want to end up with a French immersion class that is only made up of your top flying students. It's not meant to be an IB program. It's meant to be the regular program delivered in French. And research shows, and I personally believe, Canadian Parents for French believes, and we've been on this topic for decades, that every child should be included. It does not back up withdrawing a child that experiences difficulty. A child who experiences difficulty in French immersion will have exactly the same difficulty in the English classroom.
Trustee Agnew.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation.
This is like the Senate. I think I need to sit down.
I'm not as scary as the Senate.
Excuse me, it's not tenant over here.
Just a question on the spec ed piece, so thank you, Trustee O'Brien, for bringing that. And I'm just curious, when you mentioned the $385 additional that's provided by the ministry for students enrolled in French, is there any additional funds for those students who have been identified that want to participate in the French immersion program? So if we're going to be looking from a board perspective to fully support those children in a special education program, in a French immersion program, are there additional funds for us to do that?
Whatever funds you have that are attached to a student in English, they're attached to the student, whether in their English and French. Now, I'm certainly not an expert in special education funding, but as a general observer in education, I am well aware that special education fund is given on aggregate kind of numbers, not specifically identified children, so it doesn't follow kids the same way this French money does. I'm aware of that. But, however you allocate those resources, a student is a student.
Trustees, I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I just have a question for months about the sibling rule. So we're talking about expansion and sibling rule. So say we don't have the expansion, but we have the sibling rule. My concern is if one family has 3 kids and that first child doesn't get into the program, then the sibling rule would work the opposite, then the other children wouldn't get in either. Would it not?
I have a fair amount of experience with the sibling rule. I've been a member of the French as a Second Language Advisory Committee in the Toronto District School Board for way longer than I care to think of. I was co-chair of it about 10 years ago, and I stay on it. It was my first experience with the sibling rule because I had 3 kids. So how did this actually work? It worked based on location. So, if your first child got in and your kid was still in, say, that K-8 school, then your next kid would get to follow along. If perchance, and they built the program to the point where every student gets accepted, so there's no trade-off there. What you're talking about is that second, K2, as it said in one of the delegations, would have an opportunity to apply as well. It's not a great situation. Depends how spaced your children are. I'm sure the people sitting here that have kids, a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old are really hoping you're going to get this sorted by the time the 1-year-old gets there. So I don't see it as every year is a new year. So if you have, and I can show you specific data, one of your colleagues asked me about it, specific data from the TDSB where they've tracked year over year how many siblings are in each incoming cohort by school. And the thing that really struck me when I looked at a whole bunch of years of data in response to this question was really varies year over year. Some year a cohort will have a handful of siblings, and sometimes it might be half of the incoming class. I think there's a lot of chance involved in this, how spread out the kids are and so on, and whether or not people move, too, which is another big factor. So I don't think it's as predictable as you think it is, and I think that within 2 or 3 years, you would find yourself in a position where it becomes irrelevant, which is exactly what happened at the Toronto District School Board. As soon as they started to expand to meet demand, that problem just goes away.
Just a point of clarification. Would the sibling rule apply only to those children who already have a brother or sister in the French program?
Under what other circumstances would you be thinking of it?
Well, under the circumstance...
I understand that, I forget what your exact term is for it, though, but where, say, for example, you're at purple school and your French immersion school is yellow school, okay? So your grade 1 child goes over to the French immersion school, the yellow school, and maybe the younger sibling is still remaining at the home school, the purple school, and that you can apply to have that child move to the other location. Is that what you're talking about?
Because there is already a brother or sister in the French program in the yellow school.
Okay, so, these are what you would have to work out. Do you want to allow siblings to follow in JK and SK before the beginning of the French Immersion program. This is one reason why I like French Immersion program that starts in JK, because you don't even have to have that problem. It's not an ideal situation to have a grade 1 child at the yellow school and a JK at the purple school. That's not great. French Immersion parents seem to get asked to make all kinds of sacrifices that other people don't in order to participate. There is a bit of a threshold as to what families can handle. I think one of the clear issues around fairness in French Immersion within families is how I felt as a mother. I would turn myself into a pretzel for the inconvenience if my kids ended up at different schools, which is how it all kind of worked out for me. But it was really important to me as a parent to provide the same opportunities for the kids. I didn't offer, music lessons to one and not to another. And in terms of educational choice, which is so much more important than, hockey, for example, it's the child's education, it was really important to me as a parent to try. And you know that going forward, now that my kids are all graduated from university, at certain points they choose their own path. But when they're little, you're choosing for them, and you're doing your very best to provide them all with the very best. And if you believe in French Immersion and you believe in this opportunity for your children, you really want it for all of your kids, and you're going to feel horrible as a horrible failure as a parent if one kid can't get in. And that's essentially what happened to me because my other kid wasn't in the same school. So it was awful, but we managed.
It would stand to reason that if you have your first child in French Immersion, you would want to follow through with
I think
the other siblings.
Most people do. Sometimes there are exceptions to that. And
so are we suggesting that that may be one of the criteria for a sibling rule or not? I'm just trying to clarify in my mind. In other words, the criteria for a sibling rule to be applied is to have a brother or sister already in a French program.
Yes. So child 1 goes in grade 1, works her way up through a couple of years, and child 2 comes along. If we're still in the position where the board is forced to go to a lottery or chooses to do a lottery, which hopefully this won't last too much longer, if that's still the situation, then that child 2 automatically gets a spot, thereby reducing the number of spots available for the firstborns. So there definitely is a degree of unfairness to that. It's not ideal. None of this is ideal. The ideal situation, which you can work towards based on the data that I actually saw from last year's waiting list, it's not going to take a huge amount of work to add enough spots. If your registrations come in at this time of year exactly the same as they came in last year, by the time you get to staffing in April, you should be able to offer those parents that are on your waiting list a new site or a new classroom.
Thank you. I will allow one more question from Trustee Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was an excellent presentation. You're a very good advocate for French language. I've been trying to convince my wife we need a pinball machine, so maybe you can come home with me and maybe we can work on her. It's a very complicated situation. It sounds simple, but it's not simple. We're the lowest funded per capita board in Ontario. We're a growing board. The demand for French programming is in those high growth areas. I'm from Milton, portable city. It's not easy to then just say we can add a classroom. Do we have the will and desire? Absolutely. We want to satisfy that need. The problem that we're grappling with, and the reason why we're asking so many questions, is because it is very difficult to come up with this formula where somebody won't be in the position where they're losing, or where we have to take somebody and put them in a portable because we're changing programming. So we're working and we want to find that solution. We don't have it crystallized yet. and I'm not putting words into my fellow trustees' mouth, this is just my observations of the discussions we're having around the table. You know, unlike some people's belief that we're here to destroy the Catholic religion and the Catholic family, we're here putting in this time and commitment because we believe in Catholic education and we're strong supporters for Catholic education. I would rather spend the 80 to 100 hours with my children than with my fellow trustees trying to solve this problem, but it's important to us. That's why we're here. So we don't want to give anybody the impression that this isn't something that we're taking serious and it has real value to us. What I would like to hear from you, from your understanding and impression in being involved with the French language, is we understand that there is an issue with supply of teachers. Can we make the space? I'm sure there's a way that we can find the physical space, but finding qualified teachers who are Catholic, who want to come to our system, who having the funding challenges we have that we can attract. Can you give me some insight into your experience with boards that were in a similar situation?
Okay, so first I want to clarify something I said. It just, you know, you kind of fall into this lingo and then you think, ooh, how does that sound to a new group? It's not that you need to create a new classroom or a new site. A kid in French immersion takes exactly the same amount of space as a kid in English. So what you're doing is reorganizing space based on programming rather than adding space. So whether you have to add a new school in Halton Hills or Milton, wherever the growth is, or you are looking and you do have challenges as an expanding board, and I would say, you know, all boards have their own unique set of challenges in this area, whether they're expanding in some ways. So first, that is a really key thing to remember. You're not finding new space. You're reorganizing for your existing students is what you're doing. Now, on the teacher situation, one of the things you have to remember that it has been a constant since French immersion was still first conceptualized in 1965 about where are we ever going to find these teachers. And somehow in Ontario, since, you know, the late 60s, 1970-ish, when the first program started, we've gone from 0 kids in French immersion to, I just got the most recent figures, 237,000 kids in the province. So somehow we've managed to grow. And the way you do that is by growing. So as it stands right now, Halton Catholic is not contributing all that much, that many students to future French immersion teachers because you don't have French immersion till grade 12. So you're relying on your friends and neighbors at, you know, Toronto Catholic or Dufferin-Field Catholic, whatever, to contribute those French immersion graduates to come back and teach your kids. So that's something to consider. I think you have to realize that teacher supply is cyclical, and there are a lot of external factors that affect that. So, but there are a lot of stakeholders involved in trying to boost the supply. So less than 10 years ago, there was a surplus of French teachers in Ontario, which would have been around the time when you were first going to expand, and maybe if you kept going on that track, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. You kind of have to get going on it to make it work. Federal government has committed $31 million to supporting the increase in teacher supply, French teacher supply across the country. That's a significant investment that's never happened before. Strong support from Minister Melanie Joly. I'm not sure who it will be as of tomorrow, but that money is already committed. Funding proposals have gone in, and you know, it's a bit complicated with the current provincial government in Ontario, but the stakeholder groups across Ontario have been entirely committed and have worked together on workarounds from the Ontario government, which is a bit of a reluctant partner when it comes to going after federal funding at the moment. Canadian Parents for French has taken the lead in doing a research report last year about this, which is available to you. A lot of it is about retention of teachers, which is something that you can very much work on. Once your program's solidified here and you move on and you get into kind of a build mindset about this, I think it will help. I'm not sure if you specifically have a retention problem, but in general, it's hard to be a French teacher. It takes a lot of extra effort to be bicultural and bilingual. And, you know, and like any other board in the province of Ontario, you can't pay them more. So you have to work with what you've got, which is great professional development, great support from your senior staff, great support from trustees, and a strong commitment from the board that you care about French, and that helps them to think that their employer is supportive, so that helps with retention. I think you'll see Canadian Parents for French. I just worked on a project in September where we are conversing directly with the 14 deans of education across the province about this, bringing information to their attention. The Ministry of Education has an entire department that works on teacher supply, and I'll be having a meeting coming up at the beginning of December with the FSL people at the Ministry to find out how that's progressed over the last 18 months. So there is lots going on. You know, the current labor situation is probably not a great advertisement for being a teacher, but we'll get past this too. We've gotten past it before. So I think there's lots happening. I also recognize from listening to your meetings before, it would seem that a really good effort has been made by Director Daly and his staff to fill the positions that you have. And the one thing I might add is that boards across the country, indeed, are short. They're pretty good, I would say generally excellent at filling full-time positions. It gets more complicated with long-term occasionals, and it gets even more complicated with just occasional teachers. I think we're going to get past this, and we just have to keep moving forward, because that's how we got to 237,000.
So, I'm very cognizant of time because we have two other delegations. I think there's popular demand around at least two other questions. I'm going to turn back to Trustee O'Brien and then Trustee Agnew and then try to end it there.
Goodness. And I
Are
would
you
just
okay,
say
Trustee O'Brien?
My email address is also in the delegation. I'm
Trustee
happy
Agnew.
to answer any questions via email.
Trustee Agnew, go ahead.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So just to follow up on the teachers, you expressed a lot of comments and information with respect to the teacher piece. I'm curious, though, around the EA piece, French certs, French EAs. You know, is the government making the same commitment to provide additional resources and additional support to have those types of positions in place for students from a spec ed perspective that want to participate in French immersion? Because if we're talking about full inclusion of those students, we need to ensure, if we want their success in the French piece in addition to the English piece, we have to have all those same things in place.
I would say the focus over the last few years has actually been on early childhood educators for the majority of boards that start in junior and senior kindergarten, and educational assistants are certainly on our radar as a need, and in order to achieve the lofty words that are in this book, that has to happen as well. But as we all know, there aren't enough of those people to begin with, and again, we need to be graduating more, you know, students from the programs. It has to be self-fulfilling to fill those EA positions. So I don't have a firm answer about how that part of it is going to happen, but I agree with you that it does need to happen.
Chair, quickly. I think that's a very valid, I mean, we can have the conversations all we want. I understand what it says in there with respect to making sure that those students have equal access to French programming. I speak from it personally. I have a child with special needs in our board, but I think we need to be cognizant if we're looking at expanding a program and we want to make sure that we can include all students, that we can support all students. And that comes down to, if you're going to bring a student in with identified needs who has full EA support, and they're going to be in a French immersion program, and we want to offer them a spot there to be inclusive, we have to make sure we're meeting their needs from an EA perspective. So, I mean, that concerns me. There's a lot of focus being put on the teacher, but that's not the piece that we need from a spec ed perspective. The EA is one component of it, but it's a large component for a number of our students that would have to be in that program. So,
you are spot on there. I couldn't agree with you more.
So, thank you very much. I think this conversation could go on for a long time and for all good reasons. So I would like to, we have two other delegations on the same topic. We're going to treat each one separately. So the next step would be to move this to an action item. So according to our bylaws and policy I-06, the trustees may move a motion to, A, receive these delegations as information, defer the matter to a future meeting, request a staff report on this matter to be considered at a future meeting, and make a decision tonight on this matter. Excuse me for a minute.
That comes later down in the agenda.
Yeah,
What we
something
actually
like that.
Yeah.
I'm doing it step by step. Delegation by delegation. I mean, we can handle it both ways. All right, the advice I'm being given is that we're gonna go through all the agendas first and then move them all to the action item because they're on the same topic. So why don't we do that? I will then welcome the second delegation. And that's on early French immersion, Mr. Robato.
Perfect.
Okay, so I had to edit a little bit of my presentation because it was a little bit long, so just to be able to fit in the 10-minute window that I have, I had to do it. So I've changed a few things, so if you're not able to follow, I'm sorry, I'm gonna try to speak loudly, and I do have to go fast so I can fit everything in. So having that said, I'm gonna begin my delegation. Good evening, everyone, Board of Trustees, staff members, ladies and gentlemen present here tonight. My name is Javier Robato, and I'm an early French immersion parent here in Halton Catholic District School Board. I have two children. My eldest child is in grade 6, and my youngest is in grade 2. They go to an elementary school here in Burlington, and they both are already in part of the early French immersion program. I would like to talk to you this evening about some of the benefits and the importance of FSL programming. Especially, I will be speaking about the EFI, the Early French Immersion Program, in our board. I would also like to talk to you briefly about Policy 11-1, Optional French Programming, and the importance of having this policy approved. With clauses such as sibling ruling, that would help families by allowing the ones with 2 or more children to have all of their children at the same school. This, of course, would make logistics easier for that family, promote loyalty to our board, and create better bonding between siblings. I believe that all of us here tonight understand and value the benefits of having French as a second language in Canada and in Ontario, since it brings to an individual more opportunities academically, professionally, and personally. A person who is proficient in French and English may have more job opportunities, higher retention rates of employment, higher rate pay, more opportunities to travel and relocate to other parts of Canada and the world. Therefore, it should be of no surprise that parents like myself in Halton and across Ontario see the value and benefits of giving our kids the opportunity to learn French as a second language. The proof of this demand is also the demand and growth of the EFI programs across Ontario and across various school boards, including the HCDSP. Many parents from our board are still on wait lists, hoping that their children are accepted into the EFI program. Using a 2-year registration and wait list average rate from 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2020 from HCDSP, we see that for the EFI program, the combined number of applicants to this program was 319, and the number of spaces available was only 184 spots. This gives us 57.6 average percentage rate of placement, which means that almost half of the applicants did not get into the program. It also means that the average rate of demand was 42.3% greater than that of the supply. There's almost twice the number of applicants to the number of spaces available.
This means that the HCDSB, at the HCDSB, we have 184 children that did not get into the EFI program, and these families could potentially leave our board and go to a different board in Halton or elsewhere in order to get their kids into an EFI program. I believe that it would be a great mistake from our part to let these families leave our board without attempting to find a solution to their problem. So your next question to me might be, how do you know that these families who are in wait lists and who are not getting into EFI program at HCDSB have left or will be leaving our board? My answer is simple. Because at one point, my family was one of these families. Before my son was accepted into the EFI program, my wife and I had decided that although our faith was very important to us as we're practicing Catholics, we would not allow one of our kids to have the benefits of having French as second language and not the other one. In the event my son had not gotten into the EFI program, as a family, we would have transferred to a Halton Public Board where there aren't any cups for the EFI program, and we could have registered both our kids there. Luckily for us, our son was also accepted into EFI here in Halton. Like my family, we know many other families from our board that were and are still in the same situation. And unfortunately, some of them have not been as lucky as we were and have not been able to secure a spot in the EFI program. As a result, some of those families have left our board for good. These were good Catholic families we have lost. Furthermore, I would like to also present some more retention data from the HCDSB to further corroborate this point. I would like to use a 2019 Parent Satisfaction Survey conducted by our board earlier this year. In this survey, 3,230 families from our board participated. This survey stated that in 2019, 204 families had considered leaving our board in the last 6 months. Of that number, 11% or 22 of those families were leaving our board to attend a track or program not available at our board. Of that 11%, the majority of those families, 20 of 22 families, specifically stated that they were thinking of leaving our board for another board in Halton because their kids did not get into the EFI program. This is just some of the data that has been collecting regarding this matter, and that is publicly available to us from those families who chose to participate in the survey and chose to state the reason why they thought of leaving our board. I believe the number of families that thought of leaving our board and that left our board because they didn't get into the EFI program to be much greater than that. So how do we fix this problem? How do we keep these good Catholic families from leaving our board? The answer is simple. We expand the EFI program to allow more Catholic families to get in. Our board has done an amazing job providing excellence in academics while also teaching solid Catholic values. That is why this board is so highly sought out by families and why it's our first choice. However, let me ask you, what good is it to have the best Catholic board in Ontario with the best academics, a strong faith, if we're losing Catholic families from our own community? Isn't our main purpose to be stewards of the Catholic faith in our communities? Let me share with you the board's mission statement and values as stated in the HCDSB website. The Halton Catholic District School Board, in partnership with Home and Church, is dedicated to providing excellence in Catholic education by developing Christ-centered individuals enabled to transform society. At Halton Catholic District School Board, we value and aspire to be models of Christ through our actions of love, forgiveness, compassion, and acceptance. So do we realize that by turning away these Catholic families from our board, we're actually breaking the home, church, and school model? If these families leave, their kids might not be able to receive a Catholic education at another school in a different board. Christ came to the world to spread the message of good news to all people. As Catholics, we're also called to evangelization. How can we call ourselves models of Christ if we're turning away families who wish for their kids to learn Catholic faith at our schools? Families need us. Kids need us. And frankly, our community needs us to keep preparing good, strong, smart, and faithful individuals to be part of our world. Please find a way not to turn these families away. How do we expand our EFI program despite the challenges? One of the major challenges of why we cannot expand our EFI program has been the shortage of qualified French teachers, as asked earlier. I have mentioned in my written delegation many sorts of Francophone universities in Quebec and various Francophone and Anglophone job fairs where our board could go to find qualified French teachers. But for time's sake, I will not go over this right now. You can definitely look into it. It's all in the presentation that I submitted. However, I believe that there are many places where we could still be looking and finding qualified French Catholic teachers. Our board is not the only one facing this challenge. Teacher shortage is a province-wide problem, yet neighboring boards such as Hamilton Wentworth Catholic District School Board and Waterloo Catholic District School Board are also continuing to add EFI sites. How are they able to do this and not our board? Is it that they're trying harder than us? Are they looking and finding teachers somewhere we're not? Or is it something else? It has come up in different meetings during past board meetings by some board staff member that there's a concern that if the HCDSB expands the EFI program, that the regular English stream of kids might be affected negatively. But they might have to go into split classes, since more parents will choose EFI option over the regular stream option, and this would be less English kids to fill up a classroom. Quote, this should not be the case in an English board. That's what French boards are for. In an English Catholic board, regular English stream students should have a priority, not the other way around, end quote. I believe that this is the real reason why we're not expanding the early French immersion program at the HCDSB. I would like to address the first misconception. The French board is actually not an option. Since in order to qualify to register one's children in the French board, the parents must also be Francophone, since all the correspondence from the school is in French, as is the homework, parent-teaching interviews, and all school culture and activities. Most parents from our board would not be able to participate in any of this activity since our French is not good enough. Secondly, I would like to address the fear our regular stream English kids from our board would be losing out to the EFI if it was expanded. Firstly, none of us have crystal balls to know what will happen in the future, and we shouldn't be jumping to any conclusions. But let me say that there are many boards in Ontario right now who are running the EFI extended and regular stream models successfully without any negative impacts. However, more importantly than all these fears are the reasons why we should expand EFI for our kids' future and their ability to acquire language skills that will help them compete in a very competitive world, to prevent Catholic families from leaving our board so that Catholic education can remain an integral part of our kids' formation. The case I'm making for you this evening is not one of English versus French, where I want French to win, not at all. The case that I'm making for you today is where we all win. Our kids win because they learn French immersion in their Catholic schools. Our Catholic families win because they're able to provide their children with French while maintaining a strong Catholic faith. And our board wins because we're able to not turn away Catholic families. Please, I urge you, do not let fear keep our students, our community, and our board from achieving what we have set out to do. Let's be leaders in our community. Let's find solutions to this and any other challenges that come our way. Lastly, I would like to repeat a saying that my father used to tell me when I was a kid. It was in Spanish, so I apologize in advance for the poor translation. And I hope I'm still able to communicate the gist of it. There isn't someone who's more blind than the person who doesn't want to see, nor there's someone who is more deaf than the person who doesn't want to hear. My colleagues in math are always being transparent and have provided this board with all the facts and all the evidence available to us regarding this matter. It is now up to you to evaluate the information and possibilities we have given you and to make an educated decision on this matter. Please open your minds and hearts so that you too can see that there are solutions to this problem, that this is not impossible. Please expand EFI. Thank you very much for your time and for this opportunity to share some of my views with you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Rabada. Thank you for your passionate appeal.
Thank you.
I'll open to questions to the trustees. Any questions? No questions.
Sorry, I just thought,
Go ahead, yeah.
the Halton District School Board, I may be wrong, but I think their French immersion, does it not start later? Did they not increase
Grade
to
two,
grade
yeah.
2?
Mhm.
So they had more, I just wanted to clarify. I think they started in grade 2 now, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
I will call upon Mrs. Kathleen Fiesta for the third delegation on French programming.
Good evening.
Thank you, trustees, for letting me have the opportunity to delegate tonight. My name is Kathleen Fiesta, and I have 4 kids. For the purpose of keeping our privacy, I will refer to them as K1, which is my 9-year-old, K2, 7-year-old, K3, my 4-year-old, and my last one, which is K4, which he just turned 1 in October. This year has been quite challenging for my whole family. Before the school year started, my husband and I decided to move K2 from our Catholic board homeschool to our public board homeschool. So you're right, it starts in grade 2, and it's a full 100% French. This is because we want all our children to have equal opportunity in learning the other official language in Canada, which is French. My eldest K1 was accepted to EFI in grade 1, and he currently attends school at St. Mary. My third child, K3, is attending kindergarten in our Catholic homeschool. I tried applying her for cross-boundary to St. Mary's, which was denied a few times due to school capacity. Day-to-day, our school drop-offs consist of all the 4 kids being ready by 7:55 a.m. and starting to walk to our public board homeschool as its morning bell is at 8:10 a.m. After dropping off K2, my 3 kids with their auntie will walk back to the house to wait for K1 school bus that comes around 8:39 a.m. Once K1 has been picked up, K3, K4, and their auntie will start walking to our Catholic board homeschool just in time for my daughter's morning bell, which is 9 a.m. In the afternoon, this whole process starts again at 2:45 p.m. in our public board homeschool to pick up K2. Then they walk to our Catholic board homeschool to pick up K3 at 3:20 p.m. Once the 2 kids are both picked up, they hurry back to the house as K1 gets dropped off by the school bus at 3:40 p.m. Last week when we had that snowy day and the school bus was canceled, it really threw off our schedule. The auntie and my 1-year-old son, K4, had to drop off and pick up his 3 siblings to school. 2 months in this routine, I'm starting to realize how taxing this is for my youngest son, K4. He is constantly out and about with his siblings to their schools. He is also not napping well during the day due to this. Our resilience is going to get tested again this Thursday evening for a parent-teacher interview, as both my husband and I work during the day, and we need to go to 3 different schools to meet our 3 kids' teachers all in that one evening. K2 will be getting First Communion this spring, but since he goes to a public school board, he now must attend 14 religion classes at St. Matthew's Church every Wednesday evening. You're probably thinking, I'm crazy for doing this, or my husband and I are crazy for doing this. But being immigrants coming to Canada, we want to embrace what this country has to offer. And this means having all our kids both learn English and French fluently, in addition to them knowing our native language, which is Tagalog. My husband and I are praying and hoping that a slot would open for K2 next year in grade 3 at St. Mary's. I believe their grade 2 EFI currently have a few slots available. We are being optimistic it stays that way. This will bring down our number of schools to 2, which is what we've been managing all year round previously. Silver lining in all of this is that on K2's first day, when I picked him up, he told me that he is enjoying learning French and that he has made a few friends in his new school. There are also a few times I would hear both K1 and K2 speak French to each other. I also see K1 helping K2 with his French homework. Seeing how learning French has kept my boys engaged and challenged, it makes all the sacrifice worth it. We will do the same approach for K3 and K4 if they do not win a spot for grade 1 EFI in Halton Catholic School Board. Being a Catholic board, I would hope that it would be more supportive of families. With the sibling rule, the challenges I described earlier that occurs in families that have multiple kids would have been avoided. It would have provided families peace of mind that when they sign up for EFI program, they would not have to pick from their kids on who can and cannot go. It would make families more vested in the program, knowing that their kids are in it till completion in the program. It would also provide higher retention rate when siblings are in the same program versus when they are not. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions?
It's been a long day. Thank you. Okay.
Just one comment. I couldn't help thinking of when my wife and I were at your stage, and the challenges of bouncing kids around as well. So, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing it.
We will deal with the responses to the delegations under item 8.1. In the meantime, we're going to move to the approval of the minutes of the November 5th, 2019 regular board meeting. May I have a motion to approve? Trustee Tomasi, seconded. Trustee Zarnota, all in favor? Motion carries. List of outstanding items is listed for your information on items arising from previous minutes. That takes us directly to action items and the responses to delegations. So in accordance to the board bylaws and the policy I-06 delegation to the board, we have 4 options as trustees. We may receive the delegations as information. We may defer the matter to a future meeting. We can request a staff report on this matter to be considered for future meeting as well, or make a decision tonight on this matter. So I will now open the floor to any trustee who may want to put a motion on the floor on how to proceed with tonight's delegations. They were all on the same topic. Trustee Guzzo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentations. So you know that we have been going back and forth all this, so in gathering thoughts and discussions with other trustees, we realize it has become abundantly clear over the past 3 years that the Halton Catholic District School Board stakeholders, through their delegations and correspondence to the Board of Trustees and senior staff, are asking to provide the community with increased placements for immersion, optional and early French at the Halton Catholic District Schools. In response to the Halton Catholic District School Board community demand to provide increased placement in French programming and to meet demands so as to eliminate waiting lists, the Board of Trustees so the motion would be as follows, that the Board of Trustees give direction to the Secretary of the Board to develop a comprehensive plan to eliminate the waiting list, meet future demand and growth of the French programming for the 2020-2021 school year. Furthermore, we would further direct that the multi-year French teacher recruitment plan include expanding the job fair piece to include those schools identified in the delegation, including but not limited to Laurentian, Sherbrooke, Bishops, Concordia, Universities of Quebec, etc.
I have a seconder. Trustee Tomasi. All in favor, I will take a registered vote. Is there discussion on this?
Yes. Could you please read that slowly?
Sorry, I'll read just the motion.
Just the motion.
So that the Board of Trustees give direction to the Secretary of the Board to develop a comprehensive plan to eliminate the waiting list, meet future demand and growth of the French programming for the 2020-2021 school year.
Trustee Murphy.
Do you want the rest of it as well, or just that part?
Yes.
I don't need the rest of it. Somebody else wants
For the benefit of everybody, I think you should read the whole thing. Yes, please.
Sorry, you've been trumped. So further, we would further direct that the multi-year French teacher recruitment plan include expanding the job fair piece to include those schools identified in the delegation, including but not limited to Laurentian, Sherbrooke, Bishops, Concordia, University of Quebec, etc.
Trustee Murphy.
I guess my only concern is just the amount of time. To me, it seems like a fairly I don't know if using the word monumental is the right word, but it's a big task from where we are today to eliminating the wait list. I like the idea. If the wait list is satisfied, then we don't have a sibling issue. We can grow the program, and it's a more robust program. My only concern is around the timing, if that is enough time to formulate the plan. Any comments from?
Sure, go ahead.
So the reason why we put a time frame on it is the sibling piece becomes much more complex than, and I think we heard in our first delegation, it's not a simple fix with the sibling piece. Really, the ultimate fix is the expansion of the program. And my concern with the sibling piece is, it would be similar as well, is how do we do it, and if we were to do something like that, how do we do something that's fair, and in a short time frame? You know, so if we're going to do this, I think we should look at it and have a look. There was a French committee that was before where we're going to use that. We're going to have a report back on the next policy meeting. So I think it's just expanding onto that. And let's see what the feasibility is. Can we make this work, and is it feasible?
So,
I'm not asking for it to be answered right now. That's why we want a comprehensive plan to see.
So then we're really looking at putting this policy on hold and not voting on it tonight, or you're amending the policy?
No, this is a motion on its own.
Okay.
The policy is the policy. The policy doesn't speak to expanding the program. The
Right.
policy speaks to, if there is expansion of the program, this is the policy that will follow. The policy and when we expand the program and if we can expand the program are two separate issues.
So, I'm just curious, wouldn't the policy avenue, bringing it back to policy and firming up the policy on it, be a stronger option?
Sorry, if you're
Just a
asking...
question. I'm
so,
asking.
So if you're asking me,
I'm
through you,
asking.
Mr. Chair, I see the policy as a separate issue. The policy speaks to when the program, if any changes need to be made to a program. Expansion still has to deal with operations. Is it feasible, is it not feasible? If we start putting that into the policy, then we're limiting ourselves, and that's not the intention of this. The intention is we have the opportunity to expand it. Does that mean we would change policy every time we look at a program?
Secretary Daly.
Just so I'm clear on what we're being proposed to do, what we're being directed to do. It sounds like we're being directed to have enough spaces for all students in September.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we don't have the numbers at this point, what they look like, right? That's coming at the end of this week.
Right.
So it might not be the same as last year. There might be a different number this year than there was last year. So I think timing-wise, I think it's all very, very well timed in the sense that we'll take those numbers and let's look at it. And yeah, and if we can, let's see what we can do. We had a conversation last week at policy where Superintendent O'Hara said that whenever we've expanded the program, we've been able to meet the needs and the demands of teachers. So by expanding it and trying to add to that recruitment piece, if we add this into it as well and we add to the strategic plan, I don't see why we can't look at, is it doable, can we make it work? And if we can't, why can't we make it work? And if we can, what can we do to make it work?
Trustee Murphy.
So if I can just clarify, so you're asking for a feasibility study on implementing implementing a program that would eliminate the wait list. That's specifically what you're asking for? Okay.
Expanding the program, what does it look like? Can we expand the program for the 2020, 2021 year?
What are the costs? How are we going to do it?
Exactly.
So it's the feasibility study or the report or the business case that would substantiate that action that we're asking for.
Plan, it's not a study, it's a plan, can it be, what can we do to make it, to implement it in 2020, 21? If we can't do it, then why not? What would it look like, and when would it be feasible? But the motion as it stands, the way I've presented it on the floor, is that it be for the 2020, 2021 year. My hopes is, and I'd ask other trustees to weigh in, is that if we can do it, we'll make it happen. If we can't do it, why can't we make it happen, and when can we make it happen?
Any other questions? Trustee Carabello.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Guzzo. I would like to make an amendment to the motion to add furthermore, in keeping with the multi-year strategic plan of belonging, to provide a sibling rule to bridge until expansion occurs.
Can I have a seconder for that? No seconder for that. Trustee O'Brien. All in favor? Discussion.
Now, sorry.
Trustee O'Brien.
So I have a question for clarification for Trustee Carabella. Trustee Guzzo more or less said in her motion to expand the program for the 2021 year, which is next September. So if that is the case, why would we need a sibling rule?
It would be for this year until it happens, until the expansion occurs.
But its expansion is like now, because they're registering now for September.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understood it would be 2020, the September 21. Oh, this, okay.
Next school year.
So are we moving to implement right away, which sort of contradicts the study or plan that we have to bring to the table? Trustee Guzzo.
Sorry, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to the amendment that you've proposed, Trustee Carabella, I don't think it's as simple as just saying, let's put it, a sibling plan isn't just, let's say, okay, we're gonna accept siblings. There's so much more to it. We know that there's boundary issues, there's limitations, there's, like, in Milton, we know that we're bursting at the seams, so if we say we're gonna allow siblings to go over, we can't just, I think it requires a lot more work than that. I think by expanding the program, we would actually work at eliminating the wait list, so then we don't require a sibling rule, because then the ability of actually accommodating the students that want to be in the program will be there.
Any other comments? We don't have a seconder for the amendment. You did, okay. More conversation? Trustee Carabella?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I do see that. I would just say provisionally, just in case. I think we see the need to keep families together, and the hardships that happen. So I'm just putting it out there, and we'll just see if we have the vote for that.
So,
Trustee O'Brien.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Trustee Carabella, could you put the word provisionally in there, just so that we're voting on something that could be?
Okay, right, I see that. Okay, so add the word, furthermore, in keeping with the multi-year strategic plan of belonging, provide a sibling rule to bridge the time until expansion occurs, if needed. Provisionally, if needed?
If needed,
So where would you put provisionally? Provisionally. Okay, provisionally.
The end of the sentence. Okay? Trustee Agnew.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, just to echo Trustee Guzzo's, we are definitely all here committed to looking at expanding this program. When I look at that, I look at expansion for all. I understand keeping families together. I do. I truly do. I see the hardship. I definitely know what those families are experiencing. But I also grapple with I grapple with the impact that will have on those firstborns, on those other. My preference would be to look at expanding the program so that we can eliminate those wait lists, we can allow any children who are applying to get in, and then, we're being equitable and fair to all. That's just my, with the hope that we don't need a specific sibling provision, because we will be able to open up that program for all students that apply for it.
Trustee Zarnota, did you put up your hand? Oh, okay. All right, can we move this to a vote? Secretary Daley.
Sorry, so, Board of Trustees give direction to the Secretary of the Board to develop a comprehensive plan to eliminate the waiting list, meet future demanding growth of the French programming for the 2021 school year. When I read that, and I might be reading it wrong, it means we're eliminating the waiting list in September. That's what we're being directed to do.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is a plan for the waiting list to be eliminated. That's right, and if it can't be done, then you're going to tell us why. But what we would prefer to hear is how can we make it work?
Okay, that's not the way that, in my mind, that's not the way it reads. I don't think there's a plan, like it's, give us a plan to start in September of 2020. I don't see the part where it says, what if you can't do it? Like, the way I'm reading that, to me, it looks like the direction is, we're ready to go in September of 2020 regardless. I might just be not understanding it.
And I think if you come back and you say it's absolutely not possible, then we can revisit it. The motion's on the table to try to make it work, and I think we've worded it this way so that we make it workable as much as possible, as opposed to looking at a way for it not to be workable. At the end of the day, if it isn't and we can't, then we'll revisit it at that point. You'll let us know. But the idea is there's a need now.
So through you, Mr. Chair, do I have?
Trustee Murphy.
If we put present a plan, would that, then it's not, we're not directing on the implementation, we're being sent, here's our roadmap.
Point of order.
Right?
Is this another amendment? Because I'm getting confused. There is an amendment on the table. We got to...
Discussing the amendment. We're discussing the amendment.
Trustee Carabello.
It's not an amendment. We're discussing the amendment.
Not really. Trustee O'Brien's right, we're actually talking about the first motion, so you're absolutely correct, we weren't talking about the amendment.
I'm going to vote on Trustee Carabello's amendment. I think we got to do that first, right?
Are we ready to vote? I asked that question before.
On the amendment, I think so.
Okay. So, registered vote, Trustee Murphy.
Opposed.
Trustee Carabello.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Swann.
Abstain.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Karatau.
Abstention.
Opposed.
Opposed.
I thought you were calling me Mike. All right. Do me a favor, don't change my name as well. Trustee Agnew
Opposed.
and Trustee Guzzo.
Opposed.
Motion fails. The original motion. Any more discussion on the original motion?
So, could we add, present a plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have no issue with it as long as the goal is if it can be done, it will be done. I don't want a plan that comes back that says all the reasons why we can't do it. I want a plan that comes back that says, here's the reasons that we could make it work. So I would be okay with that as long as that's what it is. That's my concern.
Secretary Daly, does that satisfy your request or direction?
It does. I just, we can't recommend a plan if we don't think it can be implemented. That's all I'm saying. We can't come back and say, here's the plan if we don't think we can. We'll say, here's how we think we can do it. Here's our recommendations. Here's where we're struggling, because it'll involve boundary reviews and all those sorts of things. If we're talking about going from, we've built 4 sites over 5 or 6 or 7 years to potentially doubling it in 1 year, there's huge implications for that. So we'll bring back what our best plan and advice is to trustees, and then ultimately you're going to decide.
Then I'm fine with them when changing to present.
Are we good?
do we need to do it as a motion, or I can just add present?
Incremental.
Okay.
So,
You have the floor, Trustee Tomasi.
through you, Mr. Chair. So it seems to me that the board is giving you direction that the will of the board is that we want to expand French. So that is going to, look, you're going to give us a comprehensive plan that speaks to how it can be done. If it needs to be incrementalized, that's what we will do. So you come back to us, and then we will proceed from there.
Well, that's not my understanding after Trustee Murphy put that in there. So I think I need to hear the motion read again as changed.
As a changed motion or the same motion?
So,
No, I
sorry,
understand.
through you, Mr. Chair, if you have your laptop there, I've emailed you the motion. Okay, so we would just be adding present. You want me to reread it
I'd like
all?
to have this read with the word present.
Yes. Do you still need me to reread it? Okay. Sorry, I keep getting bumped out of my laptop tonight. That the Board of Trustees give direction to the Secretary of the Board to develop a comprehensive plan, to present a comprehensive plan to eliminate the waiting list, meet future demand and growth of the French programming for the 2020-2021 school year. And then the rest of the piece deals with the recruitment, with an existing we already have the multi-year French teaching recruitment plan. We would just add that it be expanded.
Trustee Carabella.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. And when is the plan expected? When is the time frame for this plan that we should maybe put a time frame on it?
Secretary Daly.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd already made a motion at our last policy meeting to have a report for our next policy meeting on December 10th. So it sounds like this is aligned with what our plan was. Yeah. Unless you wanted at a board meeting, but that was the motion at policy, was to bring a report to the next policy meeting with respect to expansion.
Sir, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Ballo. It was also dealing with, if I'm not mistaken, the ad hoc committee the review that was used there. So I think it elaborates more into detail with it. I am fine with it. If it coincides with the policy meeting, I'm fine with it coming through there.
Okay. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify. So I agree that we're essentially asking for similar. I'm just wondering if it's the same thing. Right. I struggle with it. I don't think it's the same thing. I think what we were looking for in policy was more around the information that was developed through the ad hoc committee as to why expansion wasn't feasible at the time that was put together. I know we looked at it from a future perspective, but that was sort of my understanding, was bringing that information that had been gathered as part of that ad hoc process to talk about some of the barriers and obstacles to the expansion of the program as it existed at that time. Whereas I think we're looking at something a little different here as far as we'd like to see if it can be expanded, and if so, how that can be expanded. Is that...
I think the question was, what timeframes can we produce this? And what I've heard from Superintendent Ballo is that...
No, actually, that wasn't. Superintendent Ballo said that we were already presenting in policy. We're just clarifying that if the timeline works, that it would coincide with it, but it's not the exact same ask.
No, I didn't say that. I said that we have a time limit that was established as reasonable, December the 10th.
My understanding, like what Trustee Agnew said, this is more than a report. This is actually a commitment to doing this. This is a moving forward, that we've made a decision, we're going to move forward. That's what I'm hearing in this, as opposed to a report. That's what I feel like I'm voting on. Do other trustees feel that?
Superintendent Valley, have your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify that I do understand that you're talking about two different things. We've already had a preliminary conversation, A, to talk about the ad hoc information that you had requested for our next policy meeting, and B, to talk about expansion options to the program, to actually have that conversation. So I know that Superintendent Burkasson and I and Fred have already started that preliminary conversation, and I believe that Superintendent Burkasson's in agreement that we would be ready for our December 10th meeting to be able to bring you some more fulsome information that speaks to both the ad hoc and what you're talking about this evening in terms of some real information around expanding the program. So
Trustee Agnew.
So could we, I'm just asking this sort of my fellow trustees, not ignoring the motion at all, it's on here, but since that work has started through policy and we've had that conversation, do we want to take a look at what comes back at policy, given that that conversation has started, the planning has started for that information to come back on a little bit of feasibility, looking at what expansion options there might be? Do we want to just see that through at policy and hear what comes back and then make a determination as to whether or not we require something further, we need more information, we want to act on that? I'm just wondering, since the process is already, the wheels are already in motion at policy, do we just continue with that? And if it's not the information we need, then we can simply come back to say we require more information, ask questions, just for thought.
Mr. Chair, can I have the floor? Mr. Chair.
Trustee Duarte.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The question here is, do we have the will to expand the program? Whatever happens to the report coming in, are we going to say nay to the will of the board, or are we going ahead with the desire to expand the program? We are just keeping the parents in limbo. The parents need to make a decision for their family for the next year. Why don't we make a decision? Besides, Superintendent Mr. O'Hare stated that if it's the will of the board, he will do anything and everything to find a staff. So I don't like the idea of it just being a report. I'd like a commitment, and then I think we should move forward with that.
Trustee Murphy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee Duarte. I think everybody here has expressed that we've made a commitment that we want to expand the program, but we have to be responsible. And I think to arbitrarily pick it, we wanted to do it expeditiously. We're on public record, this is what we want to do. But we have to be responsible, and just because it is our desire and will doesn't mean that it's feasibly possible to do. So it's a complicated procedure. So I think we have to take the advice and expertise of the staff when we're looking at this. If we arbitrarily impose a program, it can put other things in jeopardy, and I think that would be irresponsible. We've all made the commitment. We want to expand the program. Now let's get the roadmap to do that, and we'll do it as expeditiously as we can do it.
Secretary Daly.
Yeah, if we're looking at an actual implementation plan, I think it's a little bit more complex than what we were possibly bringing to policy, like boundary changes, and like this is bigger than saying we're going to add 2 classes here and 2 classes there. I think December is ambitious, to be quite honest. This is going to be a much bigger process and have greater impact, I think, than we realize. So I think in order for trustees to be able to really make those decisions, you need as much information as possible.
Trustee Tomasi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we've established that the will of the board is to expand the program. We're meeting in policy in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and we're going to be getting a report. This particular motion is dependent on what comes from that report, coupled with the fact that we will make a decision based on what that gives us, on how we're going to move forward. You're then going to come back to us. We've asked for a comprehensive plan that deals with all the issues, how we're going to implement it, what the costs are, and perhaps we may have to implement it in stages. The point is that we want the process to start.
Point of,
Secretary Daley.
That's clear. We just need a little bit more specificity around some dates, so staff can get to work on it. That's all.
Trustee O'Brien.
Point of order, to address what Trustee Tomasi said, I don't recall voting on this, on the will to move ahead to expansion. I thought this vote, this motion right now, was us voting on the will to expand. Okay, I don't think, Trustee Tomasi, you can speak with the "we," because there's no recorded vote that we have decided to expand. No, excuse me, point of order, let me finish. There is no recorded vote that we have voted to expand. This motion, to me, is a vote that we're expanding this program. That's how I read this motion, and we're doing it now.
So, through you, Mr. Chair.
You have to be recognized, so yeah.
Okay. Trustee Tomasi.
Through you, worthy Chair. When I use the word "we," I refer to the board. Of course, it still has to be voted on, but the motion speaks to the will of the board. So if we vote on that will, then it becomes the will of the board.
We haven't voted yet, so it's on the table.
Are we at a point where, do we vote on the motion, or there's more debate? All right.
Chair, could you once again read the motion?
The Board of Trustees give direction to the Secretary of the Board to develop a comprehensive plan, to present, a comprehensive plan, not develop, to eliminate the waiting list, meet future demand and growth of the French programming for the 2020-2021 school year. Just to clarify, it doesn't say that it's a guarantee. It says it's a plan to eliminate the wait list.
Trustees on note.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I adhere to life, which is keep it simple, stupid. So I don't want us to duplicate efforts. I appreciate the motion that's on there, but we're already going back to policy. I just want to see that if we expand the program, what does it look like? What are the ramifications of expanding the program? If we can digest that, then we can start to implement. But I need that information to make a decision. I don't feel like I have enough information yet to make that decision. So I will be opposing that motion, but we're going to go back to policy with the original one.
Any more comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Tomasi.
So, we are going back to policy, because policy is the mechanism by which we deliver a program. This motion speaks to the will of the board. So if we accept that will, and we have a positive vote, then we enter it to another phase, and that is we're asking staff to present the board with a plan, an execution plan, to deliver the expansion of the program.
Can we direct Director Daley to look into the feasibility of expanding the program? As opposed to, I know it's not the motion, but I'm suggesting maybe a way forward here. Because we're caught in discussion between the motion as it stands and how to interpret it versus the mechanism that's already been begun through the policy committee.
Mr. Chair, we have a motion on the table.
Trustee Duarte.
Let's vote on it.
Trying to get to that point, Trustee Duarte, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to see clearly through their vote. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
I'm not sure we can do that in the middle of a motion. I'm not sure. Can we confirm?
So through you, Mr. Chair, and I understand, the reason I'm saying that is I'm just wondering if there's a way for Trustee Guzzo to work in that policy piece that's coming back into this motion. Because I do feel like they're both sort of sitting there, right, and they're kind of siloed. Is there a way for us? It just sounds like it's redundant a little bit. I understand that they're sort of different, but I'm wondering, is there a way for us to work in that piece that's coming back to policy into this motion so it sort of encompasses both? Because we're asking for a presentation or a report at policy. We're asking for this piece that's looking for
A plan to implement.
So I'm just wondering, because I think the information that's going to come at policy is also going to be information that's going to be contained in this report that might come through here. So that was why I'd asked to see if we could have a minute to break.
Trustee Murphy.
So if we looked at it, the end result that we're trying to achieve is to eliminate the wait list. So what if we request a plan to eliminate the wait list by 2021? It was so long ago, I don't remember. I thought I had a brilliant idea.
Now, some order, please, like that, we can get through this. Trustee Tomasi, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can we establish the information that's forthcoming through, to Superintendent Bello, the information we're waiting for, what it is exactly? For
I would invite Superintendent Bello to answer that question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can you just repeat the question, Trustee Tomasi?
I was asking what information is forthcoming at policy?
Through the conversation that we had today with Superintendent Ballo and Fred Thibault, we were going to provide some, we really were not going to be bringing forth the ad hoc committee and the sustainability project. That is all available for trustees to read up on over a period of time at any time. Happy to bring that up to share if that wasn't the direction that we had heard. Our direction was expanding the program. And so our conversation was around what that would look like, what would be required in order to do that, to make it happen. I hadn't heard September 2020. That was not a figure that I had heard. I hadn't understood that we were accommodating the full wait lists, which we don't have before us currently. And so that is something that would modify what we were preparing. So that's what we're looking at, what you'd have to do, what schools are going to be chosen, how we're going to be looking at students being from grade 1 to grade 8 at the same school as much as possible, what the effect would be on the regular track students, et cetera, and making it happen over a period of time, whether it was a process, that's what we started to look at with Fred today.
Trustee O'Brien.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone until we hear the report.
We have to deal with the other motion first.
Well, no, it says a motion to postpone at a certain time of day takes precedence over motions. That's what it says, 10.5.
So we have a motion to postpone here. I'm trying to get everybody's attention first.
Go ahead, trustee Guzzo, and then we'll deal with the motion.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I know you've got a motion. I want to be clear, that was not, Superintendent Percassen, that was not my understanding whatsoever at policy. There was a discussion about the ad hoc committee. I believe Andrea also piped in and talked about the process that you had gone through when you had started the programming, and that we were going to go through all of that again, and that was going to be brought up, and I believe there's other trustees here at the table who recall that conversation. So, we also talked about the expansion piece of it, but you're right, the only thing that we didn't do is we didn't put a time frame on it. So that's why now, after these delegations and taking into consideration, and because the sibling piece seems to keep coming up, we see this as a resolution to try to deal with it, because the sibling piece, for some of us, we feel it would take more work than simply just implementing a sibling allowance.
Thank you, trustee Guzzo, for the clarification. We have a motion to postpone on the table. I need a seconder. If it helps for...
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Trustee O'Brien, can you just maybe explain a little bit on your reasons for proposing the postponement, just so we're clear?
It seems to me that without the report, that's going to go back to policy, it's hard to vote on this. It seems that one of these has to be reconciled, either the motion or the report. So the motion cannot go away. If we delay the motion until at least we heard the report, maybe it would give us more insight as to who would vote on this motion that Trustee Guzzo has put forward. That's my reasoning. It's not to take away, but I'm still in favor of supporting this motion. But I'm just feeling this piece of the information that was already decided upon may help decisions around the table. That's my reason for putting forward the motion to postpone.
May I have a seconder for the motion? Trustee Agnew. Debate. We'll go to a registered vote.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. The motion to postpone, does it need to have a deadline? What's your deadline?
I motion to postpone until we have heard the report at policy. So that is a date. December 10th. Is that it? Whatever our next policy meeting is.
Okay?
Does everybody have that?
We'll take it to a vote, registered vote.
Postpone to December 10th.
10th.
That's the policy meeting.
Okay?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Mr. Chair, discussion question.
Okay, the last one?
Yes. So I'm only concerned with the delay to make a decision. What's going to happen to our parents and families who are planning for next year, number one. Number two, what's going to happen with the board staff planning for next year? Is it going to throw it out of gear to a point where we cannot do it for next year?
If I may, Trustee Duarte, December 10th is around the corner, so this is not an excessive amount of time to wait and to give us the opportunity to do things in order. This to a vote now. Registered vote, Trustee Murphy.
So we're voting on the motion to postpone?
Yes.
I'm opposed.
Trustee Carabella.
Opposed.
Trustee Tomasi. Opposed. Trustee Swann.
Opposed.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte. Now, Scaratoa, sorry.
Abstention.
Trustee Duarte.
Opposed.
Trustee Zarnota. Trustee Agnew.
Opposed.
The motion fails.
Opposed.
All right, motion fails. So, we have the other motion on the table. Can we have a registered vote, please? Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Swann.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Caratoa.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Motion carries. Used to be item 8.9, but it is now 8.2. Superintendent Loft.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just first publicly thank my team for all the hard work that they put in this fall. There was a lot of extenuating circumstances
Order, please.
that we had to work through. Their hard work, determination, and dedication, without those, this report that you have in front of you would not be here tonight. So I'd like to thank my team very much. The audit committee, we had an audit committee meeting prior to our board meeting tonight, has approved our 2018-19 draft audited financial statements. There's a report in front of you, but I think that our senior manager of finance, Mr. Adam Cross, is going to do a quick presentation on the results of our financial statements. So, Mr. Cross?
Thank you, Aaron, and through you, Mr. Chair, to all of the Board of Trustees. I'll try and keep this as brief as I can, respecting the time and the agenda that's still ahead of me, but I get excited about talking about finance, so I'll talk quick. If I'm talking too quick, please don't be afraid to interrupt me. If you have questions as we move through my presentation, please don't hesitate to ask them at that point. So I just want to go over kind of an overarching point when we're looking at the financial statements. So for the financial statements to be relevant, the information needs to be reliable. A financial statement audit by an independent auditor, in our case for the school board it's KPMG, provides the readers with assurance on whether the financial statements prepared by management are free from misstatement. So when you look at our financial statements, there's 7 key components. The first is the statement of management's responsibilities, essentially outlining that we're responsible for the financial statements of the school board. The second is the independent auditor's report. So you'll notice that the independent auditor's report this year has been significantly enhanced from previous versions and previous years' independent audit report. This hasn't changed the scope of the audit. What it has done, though, is increase transparency around the results by putting the opinion at the front of the audit report rather than at the back, as well as also outlining the responsibilities of the auditor, management, and the Board of Trustees. When we're looking at the audit report, you'll notice that we've received an unqualified opinion, which in audit speak is a clean opinion, and it's actually the highest level of assurance that the independent auditors can provide to us. So that's a very positive thing for the school board. Looking at the specific financial statements, so the statement of financial position summarizes the school board's financial position at a point in time. In our case, year-end is August 31, 2019. It outlines the financial assets, the liabilities, the non-financial assets, and the accumulated surplus of the board. The next statement is a statement of operations. It explains the change in the overall financial position of the school board during the fiscal year. It outlines the revenues and expenses incurred during the fiscal year and the resulting annual surplus. The statement of change in net debt, this is actually unique to public sector financial reporting, and it reconciles the change in net debt for the current year and the prior year. The statement shows any acquisitions and amortization of tangible capital assets, any gains or losses on the sale of tangible capital assets, and any proceeds from the sale of capital assets. The statement of cash flow explains the change in cash and cash equivalents from the prior year and provides information about the school board's ability to generate cash to meet its cash requirements. It shows the changes from the prior year in operating, capital, and financing activity. And the last thing is the notes of the financial statement. And these are equally as important as the face to the financial statements. They often provide further context and detail to the numbers that are presented in those financial statements. And I encourage you as a board to make sure you're reading those in conjunction with the face of the statements. So looking at our statement of financial position, there are two key performance measures of the school board's ability to finance its operations and provide future services. The first being net debt, which again is unique to public sector, and it's the difference between our financial assets and our liabilities. It shows the school board's requirement to generate future revenues to fund past services and transactions. In our case, you'll notice from the previous year that it's increased $52.6 million, and this is largely driven by the issuance of temporary borrowing related to the purchase of land in Milton for a future school site. It also represents a 12% increase from the previous year when we're looking at the net debt. The other key performance measure to look at on the statement of financial position is the accumulated surplus, and that represents the net recognized economic resources of the school board. Having an accumulated surplus, which the school board does, means that the school board has net positive resources that they can deploy for future needs. I'll quickly highlight some of the changes when you're looking at the statement of financial position. So you'll see that total financial assets has increased $14.7 million. This is largely driven by an increase in cash and cash equivalents. In terms of our total financial liabilities, that has also increased by $67 million, primarily because of temporary borrowing with an increase of $56.1 million. Within temporary borrowing, there's the borrowing for the site in Milton, as I alluded to earlier, as well as $9.1 million in financing for other capital projects that will receive funding from the province in the upcoming year to cover those costs. Any questions so far? In terms of long-term receivable, so the only reason I'll highlight this is there's two components to the long-term receivable this year. The province issued a new cash management strategy in 2018-19, in the 2018-19 school year. What the result of that cash management strategy was that they were going to delay some of our funding based on our accumulated surplus balance and cash balance. So as you see in our financial statements, we have a fairly healthy cash balance as well as an accumulated surplus balance. So what they essentially did was delayed us $9.1 million in funding. So we're entitled to the funding. We will receive the funding. It's just we didn't receive it when we normally would have in previous years. Accounts payable increased $9 million. Largely with accounts payable, this is a timing difference. So it kind of goes hand in hand with cash. We have more cash on hand. We have more liabilities also on hand. And this is largely driven due to the timing of some of our capital projects. As you recall from previous presentations to the board, we did a lot of capital enhancements during the summer, at which point we received progress certificates and invoices from the vendors that trickle in throughout the fall. So it's just the timing of when we paid them, as the financial statement of financial position is at that point in time on August 31st, 2019. The second largest driver in accounts payable and accrued liabilities relates to salaries, so our salary accruals, as well as the related CPP, EI, and remittances that we have to do with respect to that. And again, it's just a timing issue of our pays don't end perfectly on August 31st, so there's a bit that we have to submit after the deadline that relate to costs incurred as of August 31st. Deferred revenue, the key that I want to point out here is with respect to the proceeds of disposition. So if you recall, we sold the St. Anne administrative site in 2018-19. And that $11 million that we received, I should say, $10.3 million we received for the proceeds of that site, plus $700,000 in interest earned on all our proceeds of disposition, contribute to growing that deferred revenue. That was all offset by $12 million in spending from that site, largely for our Assumption and our St. Mark's capital renewal projects. Employee future benefits, so this is a number that we use actuaries to help us determine, and what this represents is any benefits that employees are entitled to between the day that they retire and the age of 65. So our employees are entitled to certain health and dental type benefits, as well as workers' compensation and compensated absences for sick days prior to the change in that policy. In terms of long-term liabilities, so there's a decrease in long-term liabilities as we're paying down the debt for previous capital projects, and that decrease was $11.7 million in 2018-19. The last piece sort of to highlight on the statement of financial position is the deferred capital contribution. So this is unique to school boards. Typically in public sector accounting, when you receive funding for building capital projects, that revenue gets recognized right away, at which point it sits in your accumulated surplus, and then each year as you amortize that asset over its useful life, the expense gets offset against that. The provincial government wants us to report this differently, so they want us to report that funding on the balance sheet or the statement of financial position, and kind of bring that into revenue at the same rate that we amortize the asset. You'll notice... Yep.
I just want to interrupt you for some housekeeping.
Sure.
I need to extend the time to 10:30, so may I have a motion to extend the time? Trustee Carabella, seconder. Trustee Tomasi, all in favor? We're going till 10:30. Thank you. Please resume.
So you will notice when you're looking at our financial statements that the amortization on our capital assets was $16.7 million this year. Our amortization of our deferred capital contributions was only $15.4, so there is a $1.3 million difference, and that represents the amortization of unsupported capital. And when I'm talking about unsupported capital, this is capital projects that we committed to previously that we were funding from sources other than the government's pocket related to capital. A lot of this comes through school renewal funding and accumulated surplus. When we're looking at accumulated surplus, the overall surplus is $16.1 million. There's three components to accumulated surplus for the school board. The first is the non-designated surplus, so this is monies that the board can choose to allocate and use as they need. The next component is the restricted reserves. So these are all reserves that the Board of Trustees has approved in the past, earmarked for specific types of expenditures. You'll notice that the in-year change, so these are the proposed transfers for our surplus into these specific reserves, and keeping in line with our strategic plan in 4.2 and allocating this money to our operating reserve as well as our capital reserve. Below the accumulated surplus available for compliance, these are public sector accounting standard changes. The first one being the employee future benefits. It's a negative because that means it's unfunded. What the province wants us to do, and you can see by the change, is that they want us to essentially fund these costs, so they don't like the fact that they're unfunded. So they're basically asking our school board to bring in $450,000 a year from below the line to above the line to make sure that there's money to accommodate these future costs. The other one I want to highlight there is just the revenue recognized for land. So I talked about the deferred capital contributions. That applies to assets that depreciate. Land doesn't depreciate, so we can recognize the revenue once we receive the funding for it. When you do look at it, you'll notice that the $113 million is different from what's shown on the tangible capital asset note 9. You'll see land costs are $190 million. So that's where the difference, basically we're funding that through EDCs, and that ties into the temporary borrowing that we have, because EDCs are future funding that we're getting through the 4 municipalities based on development. Any questions? So the statement of operations, there's a couple of things to look at when we're looking at the statement of operations. The first thing as a board to look at is kind of to see, are the revenues that we raise sufficient to cover our operating costs? And for the 2018-19 school year, that answer is yes. We have a $16 million surplus, so our revenues exceeded our expenses. The second kind of piece to pay attention to is, how's the school board allocating its resources? So when we're looking at expenses, and the expenses on the face of the financial statements are presented by function or program, essentially, and you'll notice that our primary funding is directed towards instruction. 77% of the 2018-19 expenses were for instruction expenses. The next largest kind of bucket is pupil accommodation. What's pupil accommodation? That's the buildings, the schools that our students are learning in. So when you add those two together, we're looking at 91% of all our funding and expenditures is directed towards our students and providing the education that we strive for as a school board. In terms of administrative costs, the government has restrictions on how much we can spend of our envelope of funding on administrative costs, and we're in compliance with that threshold. So you'll notice the difference between the statement of financial position and the statement of operation. There's 3 columns in the statement of operations, one being the budget, as well as the actuals for the current year and the actuals for the prior year. I'm going to focus primarily on the budget, because that's what the Board of Trustees approved last summer. So the key thing to note is that this is the original budget that the board approved, not the revised budget that comes in December. So that's just one thing to kind of point out when I'm going through this analysis. So when we're looking at the change in revenue from the original budget, there was a $9.5 million increase that's largely driven by grant revenue resulting from the increased enrollment. So between budget and actuals, we had about 560 ADE increase, so that's a lot more students that came into the board after our budget than what we originally budgeted for, and that got reflected in the funding that we received from the province. When we're looking at the other provincial grants, there's an increase of $1.7 million over what was budgeted. Now, these are grants that aren't always guaranteed, and they're grants that are announced throughout the year, so they're a bit harder to kind of nail down at budget time. With respect to these grants, there are eligibility criteria and stipulations that we must adhere to as a board. Only certain types of expenses can qualify to receive funding for those grants, and we need to make sure that we're following the terms and conditions of those funding arrangements. Generally, with those types of grants, any funds that we don't spend, we have to return to the province. In terms of the other main areas, I'll kind of hone in on the other revenue. So there's a $1.5 million increase, and this is primarily due to our education development charges. So development charges are, again, something hard to budget because it's driven off the development in the 4 municipalities that we serve as a board. We had budgeted $7 million based on historical trend of where development was landing, and we got in an additional $1.5 million with respect to development charges in 18-19. This goes directly to offsetting that gap that I talked about in our land purchases. So development charges are very specific in what you can use, and basically it's the prep of the sites before we build the schools on them. And then there's just some small changes in school-generated funds and deferred capital contributions. Looking at expenses, so our expenses increased by $2.3 million from the original budget. Again, the large driver of that is instructional increases. So more students in schools equates to increased costs to educate those students, primarily being salaries and benefits, as well as some supply costs that go with that. For administration, a small increase, and that's roughly related to the system conversions, both in finance and payroll that we're undergoing, as well as some professional fees and interest expense. The last thing is pupil accommodation. So there were increased portables, again, that's driven by the increased students, as well as some temporary accommodation costs for Assumption in the past year. Any questions on any of that? So again, our annual surplus for the current year was 16.1%, or 16.1 million, and we had outlined in our action report where we were projecting to allocate some of those funds to our reserves, keeping in mind the strategic plan of building our capital reserve and our operating reserve for future use. Any questions?
I was wondering, what are our total capital expenditures for 2018, 2019?
Yeah, so if you look at note 9,
just give me the amount, that's good.
It's 85.5 million was capitalized in 2018-19.
We have a follow-up. We have $3 million contingency, or holdback, holdbacks?
Oh, and accounts payable?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
So what does that represent? What's 3 million of 85? 4%?
Yeah, but it's kind of skewed because the holdbacks primarily relate to major capital construction, so you're really only looking at the 16 million in, 9 million in buildings and the 22 million in construction in progress, because it's general practice to hold back 10%
Yes,
of
I
the
know.
invoices
That's what I was gauging it on.
that are there.
So are you saying we have no holdbacks on anything other than the major projects?
I'm saying we have holdbacks of 10%,
Right across the board?
of projects that we haven't released, those funding for.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Superintendent Law?
So I'll read the motion for everyone. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve the attached 2018-19 draft audited financial statements.
May I have a mover? Go ahead. Trustee Tomasi, okay. Trustee Murphy? Debate? Okay, we'll move to a registered vote. Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi?
Abstain.
Trustee Swann?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
I declare a conflict of interest on this issue.
Trustee Cartel?
In favor.
Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Zornota?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Motion carries. Item on the agenda is thank you very much for your patience. So we have an item as a result of, notice of motion from Trustee Carabella. Trustee Carabella, would you read your motion, please?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. The motion reads, whereas the Education Act stipulates that one of the major responsibilities of the Board of Trustees is to set the budget, and whereas the individual trustees possess a real or perceived conflict of interest due to the fact that a family member is employed by the Halton Catholic District School Board, and whereas in order to mitigate such a conflict of interest and allow individual trustees to participate in parts of the budget, be it resolved that, commencing immediately the budget and all budgets thereafter, the Board of Trustees direct HCDSB to divide the budget review process into 3 separate parts: salaries and benefits, operations, and capital expenditures, and be it further resolved that the final budget be presented to the Board of Trustees also in 3 distinct sections, namely salary and benefits, operations, and capital expenditures, to be voted on for approval separately.
May I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Trustee Tomasi. Any questions, debate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I speak to the motion first?
Oh, of course. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, I put this motion forward, because as a trustee for 2 terms now, I'm witnessing that there's conflict of interest in being, able to participate in the budget because of family members, immediate family members, or close relatives, who are employed by Halton Catholic. So by splitting the budget into 3 different areas, it allows more trustee participation, it allows a vote, and on a section that doesn't involve the conflict of interest, so that trustees can better fulfill their duties to Halton Catholic District School Board and their constituents. And I have seen it at other boards separated like that, and it seems to be something that's doable and doable. So I put that out there to you.
Trustee Zanotto.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Superintendent Lofts, if this goes through, what ramifications could there be? Are there any negative ramifications for splitting the budget up?
Not necessarily negative ramifications. It would be difficult, to say effective immediately. We do have a revised estimates coming up, and it would be very difficult for our team to have that ready in a few weeks. So that's where I see a negative issue with respect to this. But if we have the time to prepare for the springtime, then we should be able to accommodate.
I'm going to ask Superintendent Merritt just to bring up a couple of problems around the capital side that it would create.
Through the chair, so all major capital expenditures are already approved individually by the board. So any new schools we do, any renewal work, which we just did at our last board meeting, all came to the board individually as well. So we already do that, and we're actually mandated by the ministry to bring those forward. So anything over $250,000 is actually mandated by the ministry to come before trustees for approval. So we already do that. Where I can see this motion being problematic is that the new capital approvals from the ministry don't follow necessarily our budget process or our budget cycle. They can come up at any time, and we've even had ones that have, announcements have come up, and then they've been, delayed for various reasons, various political reasons for a number of months, and then are approved again. So, it would be difficult for us when we do our budget cycle, so coming up in January to March timeframe we start our budget cycle, it'd be difficult for us to predict which projects we're going to get approved on for next year, and which ones we won't. And knowing that regardless, those projects, after they're approved by the ministry, would obviously come to the board anyways for approval. So I think the process we do already right now, I think the gist of this motion is to get, to allow all trustees to be able to individually approve each project, and we already do that for capital projects. So I hope that already achieves kind of the intent of this motion.
No.
Okay.
Any other comments? Trustee
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think the intent is for us to wanting to approve each capital projects. I think this is just to break it in blocks so that it allows certain people to vote. The people that cannot vote due to a conflict because they have people working. So that's the salary part and the benefits. They can abstain from that, but then they can oversee and look at. So in order for you to accommodate that, it's pretty simple because you just go back a year. So we would only be approving or looking at what took place the year previous anyways. So it's not going to make much difference. Right? Your capital projects go from, they overlap in years. Some may start in September and go to the next year and a half.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I can see where it would be problematic is, so if we're looking at going into next year's budget cycle, so starting in January, we're going to start working on the budget and hopefully approve it through June. If we were approving the capital budget for the following school year, those projects aren't going to be completed until maybe summer of 2021. So we're looking at approving projects in this coming spring
for September 20, or for summer 2021, which is almost a year and a half in advance of that. And I would also say that typically the GSN comes out end of March, early April. Capital funding doesn't typically follow till well after that. So we actually don't even know, as we're developing that budget, we don't even know what the capital budget is for that year yet. Typically comes out kind of May, June timeframe, which is pretty late in our budget cycle to make any changes there. But I mean, it's up to you, but I mean, I would remind trustees that every capital project does come before the board, and we vote on each of them. So it's already coming before the board for a vote.
So for my understanding, the capital budget process and approval process is already very much a separate from the regular operating budget. I think the spirit of the motion is valid from the point of view of trying to carve out the salary component where there exists a number of conflicts of interest, and then leave the rest. But I think if we start to wrap all capital budget approval process that is already working and is not necessarily lined up with the operating budget in terms of approval process, I think is dangerous. We should probably look to exclude the capital budget from this motion. Any questions? Trustee Murphy.
So then to clarify through you, Mr. Chair, to Superintendent Law. So basically, would it be to realize the intent or the spirit of this motion, is it possible just to extract the salary and benefits out of your current reporting and report that as a separate bundle? And what would the wording of that be?
It would be, to answer your question, it would be possible, yes, it would be possible. There'd be some difficulty, hence why we're asking for not to have it for revised. Through what Superintendent Merrick was saying with the capital, that's a concern, but as he mentioned, he does bring it to board anyways, so he is bringing it to board. And when we do our budget for the capital, when we were talking, you heard Adam talk about the deferred capital contribution and the amortization. We do estimates on that anyway, so technically it's capital, but we're just doing an estimate on that portion of it there. And it does change, as we saw in the results. It's just an estimate at that point in time.
Trustee Bourgeois.
Sorry, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So, Trustee Carabella, would it be a friendly motion if we just removed and separated the salaries portion of it and left the rest together?
And the capital.
Like, we could make an amendment that says that the salary, I can't even read right now, sorry. Salary and benefits be pulled out and done separate, and then just do salary benefits and then have everything else together? Because really, the conflicts that have only come to the board have been based on teachers and family. I will, you know what, I'm going to make an amendment to the motion. It's just easier. That be it resolved that can you do it immediately? No. Commencing next budget, that the Board of Trustees direct HCDSB to divide the budget review process into two separate parts, salary and benefits, and all remaining items.
Just a clarification. We're talking about the operating budget and not the capital budget, right? In that motion? Because if you're wrapping capital budget as part of it, capital budget should be segregated out of it as well.
I'm not looking to change anything else except for removing the salary and benefits, to pull that out so that it leaves whatever else is the current practice, so that it allows people to still. So my motion is just that the salaries and benefits be dealt with separately, and the remainder be kept as status quo, if that sounds like a more friendly motion.
Okay, seconded by Trustee Agnew. Debate? Questions?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I have seen it at the other board. They had it separated like that. I've shown it to you, and so it is something doable, and it's already being Yes, we do get that piece, but then we also get it in the piece of the budget.
Two parts.
Yeah.
Secretary Daley,
Through you, Mr.
please.
Chair.
Secretary Daley, you next. It's all right? Go ahead, trustee.
Through you,
Antomas.
Mr. Chair. It's really more a matter when we review the budget as opposed to how it's presented. You present the budget as a whole, but we're only asking, or she's only asking, to have it reviewed in section so it enables people to come in and participate in one portion of the budget and not in the other. There's no changes whatsoever from a reporting point of view. The EFI automatically spits it out in only one way, a complete budget.
Trustee Guzzo?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And again, I reread it, and you're right, it says it's just for the review process. We're not actually asking for the process and how you report or anything else. It's just simply, when we review it, that this is how it's done, and I guess it's almost like budgets for dummies, for lack of better words, and it just helps us understand it a little bit better. If it's not doable, then it just needs to be said. I don't think the motion is asking for anything to be changed on how the budget's done. It's just the review part of it.
So do you withdraw your amendment?
I can withdraw my amendment. I just want to make sure, like, I don't think the spirit of the motion is to change anything about the budget. It's just the review process of it. It's the
Okay.
piece for us as trustees.
So it doesn't need to be changed? Trustee Agnew?
I just would like to do what satisfies sort of both parties. So I understand why we're asking for it. I want to make sure that all of my fellow trustees are able to participate to the fullest that they can, but I want to make sure that it works. So am I wrong that the motion or the amendment that Trustee Guzzo's put forward, does that meet the needs of both? That sounds good to me.
Secretary Daley, you have...
I had a different comment, but I don't think it's needed now. I was just going to, I'm surmising, I think I know the other board that Trustee Carabella is referring to. And certainly on their capital side, in the 3 years I was familiar with the board, we didn't build anything. And I don't mean that in a negative way, just that board wasn't in the same situation that we are in terms of capital projects. So it might have been able to be dealt with in a different way and not the same sort of time constraints that we might.
Are you withdrawing the amendment?
No.
No? Okay. So, Trustee Murphy?
Can we just get clarification from Superintendent Lofts that that amendment meets the spirit of what they're trying to achieve and it's doable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I believe the spirit is to allow all trustees to participate regardless of whether they have immediate family working for our board, which I think some of our trustees have a reluctance to do that because of that reason. So that would, by us separating out the salaries and benefits portion of it, which is obviously our largest expenditure as a board, and then also having it basically salaries and benefits and everything else, it actually kind of addresses Superintendent Merrick's concern as well. It's basically status quo how we've been doing it. We just vote on two different parts, salaries and benefits, and then the rest of the budget. And that's my understanding of, I think, what's been presented. Yeah.
Can we vote now? On the amendment? On the amendment.
Can I just read it? Be it resolved that commencing the next budget cycle and all budgets thereafter, the Board of Trustees direct HCDSB to divide the budget review process into two separate parts, salary and benefits and operations and capital expenditures. And be it further resolved that the final budget be presented to the Board of Trustees also in two distinctive sections, namely salary and benefits, operations and capital expenditures to be each voted on and approved separately. Does that make sense?
Okay. Trustee Murphy, registered vote. In favor?
Still in favor.
Okay. Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
I changed my mind. No, I'm in favor.
Trustee Swann.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
I've declared a conflict of interest on this matter.
Trustee Cartel.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Motion carries. Item on the agenda is, policy 2-10, release students from school. Trustee Guzzo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accepts the recommendation of the Policy Committee that policy did I jump? I jumped one, I apologize. The recommendation of policy II-10, releasing students from school, be approved as amended.
Okay. I'm going to take care of the housekeeping, okay, to extend another half an hour to 11 o'clock. May I have a motion? Trustee Duarte, seconded by Trustee Carabella. All in favor? We have extended till 11. Okay?
So I've made the motion.
All in favor? You want to discuss? Recorded vote. Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
Favor.
Trustee Swann.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Caratoa.
In favor.
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota. In favor. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Motion carries.
Sure, I'm in favor too.
Didn't you move it? Oh, okay, well. Do you feel ignored? Item 8.4, policy 11-51, operational French programming, French immersion extended, French, Nancy Guzzo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. DeRosa. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accepts the recommendation of the Policy Committee that II-51, optional French programming, French immersion and extended French, be approved at the third reading.
May I have a seconder? Trustee Agnew. Discussion. Trustee Carabella.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just on the requirements, number 1.1, staff will report annually on the multi-year French teacher recruitment plan. Was there a date put on that? Because I wasn't at the policy meeting and the sound was not too clear. I was wondering if we were putting a date, or if staff can say when a date, or...
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe during the policy meeting there was an actual date on it.
Yeah.
However, we may be able to establish that considering we got the first report in November. Maybe we set that as the date, and we can be more specific.
So it could say the staff will report in the fall on the multi-year French teacher recruitment plan.
Could we use November as the, okay.
Okay.
We're good? Ready to vote?
So the revision would be, I don't know if Superintendent Ballo, you got that under 1.1, is that we would add that the multi-French teacher recruitment plan, in November of each year.
Okay.
And then that's the only addition.
I think Trustee Carabella has another question. Two more questions.
Two more. One, I guess I'll do the easier one first. Also, 3.6, the registration process for the optional French programs shall be made available to the public. I would like clarity on understanding what that actually is. What will be made available the registration process, like wait lists or, well, that hopefully will be gone, but I'm just wondering what that means. Superintendent. Oh, yay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand it, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I understand it through this, is that it's how the selection is made, the process each year, and that would have been similar to the notice that went out in September to all the schools, saying that this is the deadline, this is the process in which we make the selections, that's the process. That's making reference to the public, not who, there would be a privacy issue in notifying who's waitlisted and who's accepted.
Last one, unless, sorry,
Just a
trustee.
minute. I didn't see Trustee O'Brien's light on. Did you want to say something, sir? No?
But Trustee Carvalho, you go ahead first.
In light of what we voted on earlier, if a new site opens and the lottery's already taken place, somehow to ensure that, like, siblings, younger siblings are kept together at their school. Just to throw in an extra...
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, we did discuss this at policy, and the general consensus was not to change, to add siblings in, and I think that's why the motion, the amendment to the sibling was declined in regards to it. So the idea is the plan will look at expanding it, but adding a sibling, I don't think it's as simple as just adding sibling into there. I think we need to be very careful in regards to changing the policy. If it is the will of the board that we don't vote on this and it goes back to policy and it gets referred back to policy, it'll be a little bit more than just making an amendment here, because I think there's lots of factors that need to be taken into consideration in regards to the sibling.
Can we take it to a vote?
Okay.
Oh, Trustee O'Brien.
Just to be clear on that, so like if it expands, though, what I'm saying is that families, maybe not like a sibling rule, but that families wouldn't get one child at this new site and one child at the original site.
I think that would be all part of the plan and how that's addressed, right? Like, I think that's one of the issues that, and the challenges that will be part of the plan is how we deal with that.
I thought we agreed that we would wait for a plan for the staff, from the staff, didn't we? Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is actually in response to a suggestion by the first delegation. I'll use the exact wording. It says, provision of special education support in French immersion be equivalent to support offered in English. I think it's an excellent suggestion. I would like to see that in the policy. I mean, and I've been looking for the ideal place to put it, and I think it would be under withdrawal from the program. And I will use the exact same sentence that first delegate said, provision of special education support in French immersion, dash extended, be equivalent to support offered in English. I think that would be good under the topic of withdrawal from program. So I'm putting that out to you. It's just, we're saying we're going to give we will give equal special ed support in French immersion, unless my trustees could think of a better place to put that.
Any comments?
So just to, through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, is that something that we need to, and you know obviously how I feel about spec ed, but is that something that, I mean, isn't that a given? Like, we're going to support our students, whether it's through French programming, whether it's through English programming, whether it's through whatever other programming, we're going to support the needs of those students as required. I don't know that it needs to go in there specifically, I just think it's a given, but...
I'll respond to that. You would think it was a given. As our delegation said, it's been in the government documents since 1977. My experience, though, is that often doesn't happen. So to have it in policy, I just would think reinforce that equity piece that we need in this policy to make it complete.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Superintendent
just
Cipriano.
to, we do, for information for the board, we do have students in our French immersion and extended French programs who receive special education services either through CERT support, some have EA support. This is happening in our schools currently. I can, with quite certainty, state that those supports are not provided in French language, but they are supported in the English language in those French immersion and extended French programs. We currently do not employ any EAs that I'm aware of that have French as a second language qualification. I was earlier, as part of the initial delegation, I had a question around the EA training programs at many of the colleges in Ontario. Not one of them, to my understanding, offers the training program in French. So it would be difficult to put something into policy that we wouldn't be able to execute, because we do, again, as Trustee Agnew indicated, we do support students, many students in our schools in French immersion and extended French with special needs currently in their first language, in the English language, but they are supported. So I know that Trustee O'Brien indicated before that there was, from his experience in the public board, that families are counseled out of French immersion with students with special needs. That is not our practice. Again, we look at each case by case with families. Ultimately, it is a family decision, a parental decision, whether they want to continue with the French immersion program for their children. It wouldn't be, for the most part, again, our practice is that families have a very large part of that decision. So we do support students. We support them in English. I'm not sure if that language in the policy would change our current practice.
So, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So to Superintendent Cipriano, if a child is in French immersion who has special needs, who has an EA, would that EA follow into the French classroom?
Again, if during the independence rubric process review of the student needs, if it was felt that they would need that EA for that period, whether transitioning into or transitioning out of French immersion or during the French immersion instruction, again, the school would make that decision. They could use that EA support in the French immersion classroom. And I am aware of a couple of cases that we do have EAs in French immersion classes and extended French classes.
Thank you, Mr. I think having this in the policy would be a step towards equity. So I'd like to make a motion to put that sentence in the policy under withdrawal from program. Unless you could think of another place to put it. I'm looking through the policy. I would be happy anywhere in the policy, but I would like to see that sentence in there. Perhaps, Trustee Carabelli, you could think of a good place to put it.
Can you repeat?
The side conversations don't help the amount of time here, so can we stay focused? You're putting forward a motion?
Yes.
Okay, can I have a seconder, please?
Can you state?
I will state the
Well,
motion.
I thought he restated it, so restate it, please.
Okay, I move that, the phrase, provision of a special education support in French immersion / extended French be equivalent to support offered in English.
May I have a seconder for that? You'll second, Trustee Carabella? Discussion.
Trustee O'Brien, can you just tell me again where you're referencing?
I'm referencing the first delegation under next steps.
Okay, but if you look at where she makes recommendations under 5.1, it's very similar to our current language. So I'm just trying to understand, are you looking at her 5.1, withdrawal from program? It reads, where the needs of a student may be best served by withdrawal from the program, such withdrawal may take place after following the implementation of reasonable intervention strategies by school staff. Conferences with parents, guardians, and students to discuss progress, option, and future implications shall be conducted prior to withdrawal. It's very similar to our current wording, so that's why I'm wondering. That was her recommendation in regards to the policy.
Yes, that was our recommendation. I'm just trying to piggyback on the delegation.
So that's through the delegations. If you go back to on page 10, on her delegation, That was her recommendation. She made recommendations under all points of the policy.
Actually, that was my recommendation, because, I wrote the policy.
Are you looking at her delegation?
I'm looking at 5.1 withdrawal from program.
So, I know, but if you look at page 10 of the delegation, under 5.1, what she's recommended. That's what I just read off.
She just copied down what we had already in there.
Can I make a suggestion? We have a motion on the table, we have the opportunity to debate it.
She did not
And we
change
have the
that.
excuse me. We have an opportunity to ask questions, right? Not necessarily how to figure out which paragraph to put it in. So...
I'll respond to that. What you're reading is what she wrote down was right out of the phrasing out of our policy, and she did not change that. That's one that we wrote ourselves.
Trustee Agnew, go ahead.
Just a question through you, Mr. Chair, to Trustee O'Brien. Is there perhaps an opportunity for us to reference, as opposed to putting that specific wording, maybe we reference the document that our first delegation had mentioned that went over the support for special education students within the French program? So could that become part of the document that's referenced in the policy?
I would prefer it actually in the policy myself. So I'm putting forward that amendment that we put in that phrase.
Okay? Any other comments on that before we take this to a vote?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I propose a change to the wording, number 2, the Director of Education.
Is this another motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay?
I move to alter the description of number 2. The Director of Education has the discretion and responsibility to. I would change that to the Director of Education has the responsibility to.
This is spinning off into a policy meeting now, so... can I have a seconder for that?
Sorry.
Now, one thing at a time. One thing at a time. We have a second amendment to deal with, and, well, hold on a minute. We have a second amendment to deal with. I'm looking for a seconder. Trustee Carabella. Yes. I was going to acknowledge her. Thank you for the heads up. Now we can debate. Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, I would actually move that we refer this back to policy, because this is turning into a policy discussion, and there's other business of the board that we need to do, and if we're going to deal with this, then, so my motion is to defer it back to policy.
So I have to speak to her counter motion. So to facilitate the matter, I withdraw my motion for the amendment.
Trustee O'Brien, would you do the same?
To facilitate that, I will withdraw my motion for the amendment.
So the motion on the table is to refer this matter back to policy. Okay? May I have a seconder for that, please? Trustee Murphy. Any discussion? Registered vote. Trustee Murphy.
In favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi.
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Kayatoa.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Motion carries. So now, moving on item 8.4. The motion is still on the table, correct?
No, it's referred back.
It's referred back to policy as a result of that? Okay. Item 8.5, policy II-53, exemption from instruction related to human development and sexual health expectations. Nancy Guzzo.
Thank you. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that Policy II-53 exemption from instruction in the Family Life Program, Fully Alive, related to the human development and sexual health expectations of the Ontario Curriculum, Health, and Education grades 1 to 8, 2019, be approved at the second and third reading. However, I do have a note that was missed that is reflective from the policy on page 49, which is page 2 of 3 of the policy, bullet 2. There is wording that is missed that was passed in the policy meeting minutes of the October meeting. It should say, and the parents are primary educators of their children. So if you look at that again, so that's bullet 2. It says the home, the church, and the school are partners in the education of the children in faith and morals, and parents are primary educators of their children. It'll be reflective as that change was approved and voted on in policy. So as it's not noted in your documents, but that is what was passed in policy, so.
So, we have a motion. Can I have a seconder for the motion? Trustee Tomasi. Debate? Registered vote. Trustee Murphy.
Favor.
Trustee Carabella.
Abstain.
Trustee Tomasi.
Favor.
Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Caratoa.
In favor.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota. Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo.
In favor.
Motion carries. Item 8.6, III-11, hiring and promotion. Trustee Guzzo.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accepts the recommendation of the policy III-11, hiring and promotion policy, academic and non-academic personnel as amended.
May I have a seconder? Trustee O'Brien. Debate. Trustee Zarnota.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As I missed the meeting, but I did watch it on YouTube for the 4 hours that I watched that meeting. So I have a question to my fellow trustees, because I need to understand it, because I'm struggling. Bullet point, so under principles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the Board of Trustees, through a hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, the secretary, director, the executive officer of human resources, and a senior staff member will perform the function of selecting the candidate for supervisory officer and executive officer. My issue is with the last sentence. The final candidate in each hiring situation will be presented to the board for approval in camera. I really struggle if we are having a committee to sit on a hiring committee. Why do we need them to come back to us for the group of 9 to approve again? And I really need someone to explain that rationale to me.
Through
Trustee Tomasi.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Trustee Janet O'Hearn. It's the process that we follow with everything. So when something comes in camera, we vet it, and then after which time we bring it to the public forum, which is the only place we can approve policies or anything else that we do at this particular board. For that reason, it's in there.
Thank you, Trustee Tomasi. My issue with that is we have many other committees, and some of them due to personal and private reasons, obviously, we can't bring to the board. We have committees where we select trustees to go and make decisions on behalf of us. I think this should be in the same vein. If we're going to put trustees on a hiring committee, it should come back as information, not approval.
Follow-up question through you, Mr. Chair. So that is not the process. The process that anything that comes from a committee, there's no decisions in committees. We can only refer matters back to the board. The approvals only take place at the board level. That is all of us.
Trustees Zarnota.
With all due respect, we're going to have to disagree agreeably because we have the discipline committee. That doesn't come back here for approval at the board.
It's not the same thing. That stops at that particular level. That's a process that's been put forward by the Ministry of Education. It's not our process. Our process is that we approve everything at this particular board table.
Are there other committee decisions that come to here other than information? Curious.
Sure. Policy.
Just asking.
Policy does.
CPIT.
The reason policy...
SEAC. Audit Committee. Or the budget. So I don't know. Murphy, did you want to say something?
I was
Or were you
actually
trying to
stretching
block-
and yawning, but
Yawn.
now that I have a live microphone, I'm going to use this opportunity. I understand what Trustee Tomasi is saying. I have a fundamental problem with it in that my interpretation of the role of a trustee and the duties of the Director of Education are different maybe than others. So I think as the Chief Education Officer of the board, his responsibility is to hire and assemble his team, and I take it back to my management experience. If we're now taking that role away from him, in essence, we're not talking about personalities, I'm talking about the actual position itself. We're absolving that position of responsibility for his management team. And if I was that person and the group, the hiring committee, put somebody in position that I disagreed with and it didn't work out, I would say, told you so. That wasn't my decision. That's not as a manager of this area, you really need the latitude to make those key decisions, to have an effective team. And when I read the roles of trustees were to designate that responsibility to the Director of Education. And I know what the rebuttal is going to be. I've read through the Act. The Act is very ambiguous. The Act says the board can do everything and anything, but if you look at the intent and the spirit of what the role of a trustee is, it's an oversight role. It's not supposed to be in those levels. I went reading the Education Act, it says the board, and it doesn't specify who the board is. So it's interchangeable, and it really wasn't, when it was written 100 and some odd years ago, it really wasn't meant in that spirit. So I know there's differing opinions. I stretched. I have a live mic. I gave my opinion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can we bring this to a vote?
Trustee O'Brien.
I would like to speak to that point as well. As it stands now, there is one amendment I'd like to make in that point. It has to do with the actual selection itself. And in that says, the phrase starts off, the Board of Trustees through a hiring committee composed of 3 trustees. I think we need one more phrase after that, and I move that the phrase chosen by a randomly selected process be placed after the word trustees. That's my motion.
This is a motion on the floor. Can I have a second?
I'll read it again. I move that the phrase chosen by a randomly selected process be placed after the word trustees.
May I have a seconder for that? Trustee Duarte. Yes, speak to it, please.
Okay. I've had a lot of discussion with trustees about this bullet in particular. I think if we don't have that phrase in there, that selection process that's a guarantee that it's going to be fairly selected, who those 3 trustees will be. I think there's no other way to make it fair. I think that if that phrase is in there, and if it's random, then there can be no doubt about the fairness of how those 3 people were selected.
Really?
Recognizing that the same 3 people could get selected every time.
Excellent point. So I would propose then that if 3 people are selected once, they wouldn't be now selected the next time.
Can I have a can I ask, I'd like to add another layer to that, if I may. I can. I'm not allowed to comment. Can I comment?
I'll allow it.
Allowed? I would never be accused of not following the rules. I want it right back after I made that comment, though. I would like to add maybe another layer to this, is that, I think it is likely, and not necessarily by intent, that we enter into a situation of conflict of interest. So there should be, whoever the trustees are on the table, around the table, or the members of the committee, there should be some consideration to potential conflict of interest for the people who sit on that committee.
Sorry, thank you through you, Mr. Chair, and not to belabor any points, but we seem to be getting into rewriting policy at board tables. We had wholesome discussion at a policy meeting. If we need to get and revise things, then I suggest we revert them back to policy, which is then going to delay other policies that need to be addressed and whatnot. So I think if we are going to not agree in what we have put forward at the policy meeting, which was last week, if other changes needed to be made, we should have dealt with them there, because we're rewriting policy at board meetings, and at this point, it should just be the people who voted in favor will continue to vote in favor, and the people who are opposed, it should be a continuum.
Are you
If there's clarification that's needed, then that's fine, but we're getting into a very dangerous thing of rewriting policy under very strict guidelines.
Are you bringing it back to policy, Trustee Booth?
Wait a minute.
Just bringing a point that the reason why we have it at policy is to work through it and so that when we get to this point that we're actually passing the motion on.
So, we have a motion on the table, and we're gonna have to take a vote pretty soon to extend. But I'm gonna use the 2 minutes as efficiently as possible. We have a motion on the table. Superintendent O'Hara.
I do apologize that this didn't come to mind at the policy committee meeting, but I am concerned for the board that if the committee has gone and made a decision as to who the candidate should be, and that isn't supported at the board table, if that has to be approved, that there's legal liabilities that the board as an entity could face if that's challenged by the individual who was successful. And so that could end up meaning that that individual could file a human rights complaint and question the process and get into pulling the board into, why did you not agree to what the selection committee agreed to? So how would well, things have come out in the past, and my concern is if the selection committee has agreed on somebody and that isn't approved by the Board of Trustees, that could create some liability.
So, excuse me, it's at 11 o'clock, we're gonna, I need a motion to extend. Trustee O'Brien, seconded. Trustee Carabella, we need a unanimous vote. I'll register the vote. Trustee Murphy?
Opposed.
Wait, no. You cannot do that if a motion's on the table. You gotta vote on this. We gotta vote on the motion.
Opposed.
The motion's on the table, it's gotta be voted on.
Is this correct? Can you fact verify this?
So we gotta do the amendment first. Trustee Ward seconded it, so you deal with the amendment, then you withdraw.
They can withdraw.
They could withdraw, yeah.
So do you wish to withdraw? No.
Withdraw.
So it has to go to board.
So,
Through you, Mr. Chair, point of order. So, the question can be put on the table to withdraw the motion, and it has to go to the person who put the motion forward and the person who seconded it. If one of which agrees to withdraw it, then you don't have a motion on the table.
my intent was not to withdraw. My intent was to proceed. We're proceeding. Do you want the question, do you agree to withdraw, trustee Tomasi? O'Brien? There we go. You're not withdrawing? Okay, so we're proceeding with the motion. Can you restate your motion, please? Okay? We're voting on the motion, on the amendment to the motion. Trustee Murphy?
Opposed?
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Tomasi?
Against.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Caratoa?
In favor.
In favor?
Thank you. Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Zarnota? Opposed? Trustee Agnew?
Opposed.
Trustee Guzzo?
Opposed.
Motion fails. Back to the original motion.
We could discuss it.
So, hold on. The amendment just failed. We're going back to the original motion. Any question on the original motions, please? Trustee Agnew.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a question to Superintendent O'Hara, and thank you for the, I appreciate the comments around the legal piece. Is there a way for us to understand more about what that legal implication would look like? Like, I'd like to, and it doesn't have to, it has to be, I don't want to say it has to be now, because you can't give that opinion, but I would like to understand if we're going to really go through with this, I'd like to understand at the end of the day if there is a liability piece for us as a Board of Trustees. I just think it's an important piece to have. I'm welcome to anyone else. You brought up a good point, and I just think it's worth looking at.
Trustee Tomasi.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, the trustees are legally liable regardless, in any scenario, in anything we decide. I don't understand why Mr. O'Hara has brought up the legal issue. It doesn't play here. We're a legally bound board, and we're liable for everything. It's not staff that's liable, it's us.
So, to clarify, I just would like to ask the question again, though. If it doesn't, you can make faces like you want. If it doesn't... Would you
give her the opportunity to respond, please?
If it doesn't, so there's different pieces to the motion, right? There's the piece about the hiring committee, and then there's the piece about bringing it through as an action item. And so I hear what you're saying, Trustee Tomasi, but I'm wondering about the piece when it does come through to the board for final approval. That's the part I'd like to understand. So I would like to understand more about if a decision is made at the hiring committee and it comes through the Board of Trustees for approval, whether you call it rubber stamp, whatever you call it, if it comes through here for approval and for whatever reason it is not that hire is not approved, what could be the liability, what could be the fallout for that? And I don't know how we get that, if that's a legal opinion that we can get on paper, if we can, I would just like to understand more about that to mitigate what that exposure would look like. That's just my comfort level.
Any other comments, please, before going to a vote? Trustee Guzzo.
I really don't see an issue here. Like, basically what Superintendent O'Hara is saying is that someone doesn't get hired, they can bring it to the Human Rights Commission. We are the final people here. We're the final deciders of who gets hired. How would they even know if they got approved? And if they did find out, I mean, I can't see if there's any case, and there are so many boards around us that do this, why is it not an issue with them? And it's interesting, I just feel that, it's a redundant point, and,
Trustee Guzzo.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I would just reiterate as, my question, just in follow-up to Brenda, Trustee Agnew, is Superintendent O'Hara has made a comment about it being a human rights tribunal. I also don't think that the intention is or in camera that stuff gets out. If that is happening, then we have a bigger issue that we would need to deal with. But we would also have to look at is to make a comment that we're open to liability, there would have to be an assumption that we violated somebody's human rights. So I don't think that the spirit of any of this is that we would do that, and nor do I would think that any hiring committee that senior staff along with trustees are sitting on, that they would make a decision that then would be countered by a violation of somebody's human rights. And I'd also be interested to hear how other boards have done it and avoided liability if that was the case.
Again, I'd be happy to go and work that up and talk to legal counsel about that. Part of the concern would be it's the perception of the individuals. It's not sometimes reality. And so if you have a situation where you've decided not to go with a certain individual, then where's the explanation to that? And in the person who thought that they were successful and then weren't approved, they could infer other reasons, right? Are there any other prohibited grounds under the Human Rights Code as to why suddenly they weren't successful? And the other point, which I'm not sure we have really turned our minds to in the policy committee, is that anything around a superintendent pool. What's the status of that, and what would we do in terms of moving forward?
So in the spirit of time, I just want to make one general comment before taking this to a vote. It appears to me that there's enough questions, unanswered questions, on this issue. So, one more question, and then...
I'd like to actually make a motion to refer it back to policy, because we're not going to resolve it here. We seem to be rewriting it, so this isn't the intention.
Okay.
There's a reason why we have it, so my motion is to refer it back to policy.
Refer back to policy. Can I have a seconder for that? Trustee Murphy. Can I have a debate? No debate? I will go start the vote, the registered vote. Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
Opposed.
Trustee Tomasi?
Opposed.
Trustee O'Brien?
Opposed.
Trustee Caratoa?
In favor.
Trustee Duarte?
Opposed.
Trustee Zarnota? Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
Motion carries. Pardon me?
You have to vote.
I vote in favor of referring it back to policy. Yes, okay. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Trustee Zarnota? Trustee Murphy? All in favor? Good night, folks.
Rejoice the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women. Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Father, Son, and Spirit, amen.